Meet the kingdom's third prince, the royal Spare. But this Spare just unlocked a skill his brothers can only dream of. His family is legendary, the greatest swordsman on the continent. That's cool and all, but in a world where magic reigns supreme, a sharp sword only gets you so far. So our guy decides to rewrite the rules. He starts weaving magic directly into his body using a busted technique called the Mana method. He forged this power after collapsing inside a shadowy cave, forced into a battle against a faceless specter to claim his prize. The results? Absolutely broken. Now, a single swing of his sword pulverizes his opponent's steel. With mana-charged attacks, he blasts through any defense like it's made of paper. Rocking this insane power-up, he finally has a chance to stop the empire that completely wiped his kingdom off the map in his past life. Yeah, let's rewind to see just how bad things got. The last prince of the shattered Briol kingdom was crawling through the mud, just looking for a way to die. A shadowy figure looms over his half-dead body, not to help, but to twist the knife, whispering how the destruction of his home was all his fault. Flashback 10 years. Our prince was a full-blown gambling addict who, somehow, never lost a single game. Totally consumed by the thrill, he ignores his family's trusted mage when he tells him to leave. His opponents, salty about their losses, start accusing him of cheating. Their accusations ignite his fury. The young prince snaps, sending the entire gambling table flying in a fit of rage. He then drops a bombshell, proudly declaring his identity as the third prince of Briol before straight-up murdering the men. Later that night, he's late for a meeting with Yekaterina Ivana Granzine, the empire's own princess, and she is absolutely fuming. His lame excuses only throw more fuel on the fire. In a heated moment, she rips off the necklace he gave her and hurls it to the ground. Yekaterina tells him to get lost, leaving the prince totally clueless about how to fix the mess he's made. But they weren't alone. A spy lurking in the shadows caught every word. By the next morning, the wheels of disaster were already turning. That one lover's quarrel spirals into a massive international incident. The fragile truce between the Empire and the Briol Kingdom shatters, pushing both nations to the brink of war. Until one day, the kingdom's day of reckoning finally arrived. In a terrifying surprise invasion, the kingdom's main gates were incinerated before his eyes. The war had officially kicked off. The conflict raged for years, an unending and savage meat grinder that chewed up countless lives. During the chaos, the most feared man on the continent, Fiore Briol, mysteriously vanished. Without him, the tide of the war instantly shifted in the Empire's favor. As the war dragged on, Yuri became convinced that the Empire's princess, Yekaterina, was the one who had betrayed him, leaking secret intel. The moment his father stepped out of the country, the Empire launched its devastating attack. At first, Yuri didn't want to believe she was responsible for the bloodbath that consumed his family. But then he got an apology letter from her, and his suspicions sank into a cold, dark certainty. The war went on, and he fought like a demon for his own survival, cutting down enemy after enemy. But exhausted and backed into a corner, he finds himself surrounded by a sea of the Empire's knights. Yuri had already accepted his fate, ready to die. But before the final blow could land, a loyal knight dove in front of him, taking the fatal strike with his own body. The knight, Laurent, used his last breath to give his prince a chance to escape. As much as it tore Yuri apart to leave him, he had to swallow his grief and run for the future of his kingdom. A few agonizing days passed. The Empire's hounds were still hunting for him. Yuri found a place to hide out, but it was obvious he wasn't going to last much longer. At this point, total despair crushed him. He was forced to accept the grim reality that his father had likely been assassinated as well. In that moment of weakness, an Imperial knight kicked down his door. Instead of ending the Briol family line right then and there, Yuri pleaded with the man, begging him to let him live for the memory of his family. The knight, seeing his desperation, actually hesitated. He declared that the Empire was doomed to pay for its crimes. He told the last prince to run, just as others were closing in. Yuri bolted once again, gambling his life on the slim chance that he could get his revenge someday. But in the end, it was all for nothing. Everyone was dead. He knew it was only a matter of time before a knight came to finish the job. And that brings us back to him on the ground, with the mysterious dark figure telling Yuri that he doesn't even deserve the peace of death, pinning the blame for everyone's fate squarely on his shoulders. The figure then unmasks himself. It's a grotesque, zombie-like warrior from hell. This thing is Laurent, the very same knight who died protecting him. And now he's clawed his way back from the grave to kill Yuri Briol, the prince responsible for the ruin of his own kingdom. His blade plunges into Yuri's heart. But what hurts way more than dying is the crushing wave of guilt that suffocates Yuri in his final moments, drowning him in an ocean of despair. The very last thing he remembers are the cherished words of his father, telling him to never abandon his honor. As his consciousness fades to black, the next time he cracks his eyes open, he's not in the same world. Yuri Briol awakens in absolute shock. Only this time, he's a child again, getting an earful from his father for having been asleep for 3 entire days. His father, etched with worry, stays glued to his side, monitoring his son's fragile state. Everything is happening all at once. Yuri's mind is racing, trying to figure out how in the world his dad is still breathing, let alone why he's even here. Crushed by despair, the boy completely shuts down, grieving for his father, who died moments after he did. But the leader of the Briels has no clue what his son is rambling about. Yuri clutches his father's hand, admitting this twisted ending isn't as shocking as it should be, because for all his father's speeches about honor, the man was hiding some seriously dark secrets. Finding his son's chatter as bizarre as ever, he delivers a solid thwack to the kid's head, nearly sending Yuri into another dimension. The sharp sting brings instant tears to the boy's eyes. He whines about why his father couldn't ditch his hitting habit, even in the afterlife. It seems Yuri is totally convinced. They're both chilling in hell right now, until a single leaf drifting past the window jolts him back to reality. His gaze locks onto the breathtaking scenery outside as a wild realization dawns on him. This place isn't hell. The underworld wouldn't be decorated with such vibrant life, with people so full of energy. And besides, if this really was hell, there'd be other sinners milling about, and legions of demons would be roasting Yuri for the pathetic life he led, a life that ultimately led to the downfall of his entire kingdom. The truth slowly begins to set in as he stares at his father and his brothers, all alive. Abruptly, the world starts to swim in his vision before all goes black, and he collapses, his family shouting his name in a panic. The truth is, in that very moment, the third prince of the Briel kingdom had been flung back in time to his 13-year-old self. Let's jump inside his head for a second. The entire time, Yuri figured this was just some messed up dream, or maybe a final flash of deja vu before he died for good. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't force himself to wake up. On top of that, the world hadn't ended like he remembered. Life was just carrying on, and memories from a life he'd long since forgotten were bubbling back to the surface. He sits through a perfectly normal family dinner and finally accepts the impossible truth. He has traveled back to the past, to the spring he first turned 13. He's been given a second shot at life, a chance to undo all his mistakes. The next morning, a maid enters his chambers to wake the young master. Yuri had specifically asked her to wake him on time, but he's still completely knocked out. The kid finally shoots up in bed, a wave of panic washing over him when he remembers he's supposed to be at sword training. He scrambles to get ready, begging his maid, Ina, to prepare everything while he quickly washes up. He's in such a frantic rush that Ina has to tell him to just take a breath. She suggests they start simple, by just helping him wash his face. But just seeing her again, alive and well, unleashes a flood of traumatic memories. It's a gut punch, because in the original timeline, he was the one who found Ina's butchered body among the casualties. The chilling image of her death still fills him with a white-hot rage. Turning to face her, Yuri makes a completely unhinged request. He wants his maid to slap the ever-loving crap out of him. Ina is speechless. Her whole purpose is to serve him, to keep him safe. Hitting him would be the ultimate betrayal of her duties. It's a serious offense for any servant, but Yuri fires back that it's a direct order from him, so that should make it okay. The maid, still worried, asks if he's absolutely sure. A confident Yuri is mid-sentence when a massive smack cracks across his face, a sound so loud it spooks the birds outside the window. Just imagine if she accidentally killed him. The series would be over before it even started. Fast forward to the training grounds, and yeah, one side of Yuri's face is swollen like a cartoon injury. He completely forgot what a powerhouse Ina actually was. While he's practicing his swings, the other knights are just pointing and laughing at him instead of offering him some ice to take down the swelling. My man's getting roasted by the entire squad. The wildest part is that Bernard, his sword instructor, doesn't even say a word about his swollen face. Then the kid notices something else. His teacher isn't correcting his awful stance or sloppy footwork. He's just letting him go through the motions, basically a glorified sparring dummy with zero actual teaching. It gets Yuri thinking, how did this guy even become an instructor? Then the third prince recalls a conversation he spied on, between Bernard and his father. His sword teacher was complaining about Yuri's squandered potential. He said the kid had god-tier talent, but he was too lazy to take any of his training seriously. He had all the fundamentals to become the greatest warrior the kingdom had ever seen. Turns out, Bernard was actually an amazing teacher. It was Yuri himself who was such a terrible student that he basically forced the man to give up on him in his first life. The younger Yuri hadn't cared and just slacked off even more. Thinking about it now makes the current Yuri's blood boil. He knows the catastrophic mistakes he made as a kid. So this time, Yuri stops and turns to face his instructor and commands him to start training for real. Our boy is officially locked in, ready to give his 100%. A grin spreads across the swordmaster's face. He has no idea what sparked this fire in the kid, but he's hyped to hear it. Bernard erupts in a pulse of electric blue aura, announcing that the real training is about to begin. With that, he blitzes forward in a flash of speed, his blade slamming against the young masters as a brutal reality check. Yuri desperately parries the potentially lethal blow. Bernard casually steps back, leaving our hero with a nightmarish look plastered on his face. He'd gotten so caught up in his own hype that a massively important detail completely slipped his mind. The man crackling with that insane blue energy wasn't just some instructor. Before serving the kingdom, he was feared as the sword demon. And yeah, that realization has Yuri absolutely shook. You can practically see the color drain from his face. After a grueling beatdown, the kid collapses, utterly defeated and spent. Ouch, he just got a savage taste of what an actual training session is supposed to feel like. The sole reason he was able to even keep up was because of the combat experience hardwired into him from his past life as a mercenary. Despite fighting for his very survival, Yuri sees the silver lining. Yeah, it was absolute hell, but he's leveling up at an insane rate. The real shocker, though, is Bernard's reaction. He's totally floored that the young prince managed to deflect every last one of his attacks. The kid's learning curve went vertical mid-fight. Their session is shattered when Ina flings the door open, gasping for air and begging the young master to come with her immediately. Yuri and Bernard are both on high alert. The king is summoning his son. When our MC demands to know what the big rush is, he discovers it's because Count Johannes has arrived and brought his son along for the visit. And this isn't just any kid. This is the same slimeball who betrayed the kingdom of Brielle, throwing open the gates for the Empire's invasion. Got Varkvar is a two-faced traitor, and now his ghost from the past has reappeared. Turning to his maid, Yuri's voice turns ice-cold with resolve as he demands to know where that scumbag is. Cut to the next scene. The royal family is at dinner with their guests. Count Johannes is visibly impressed by the third prince's newfound poise. He even compliments the boy on his solid physique. The king nods in agreement, wondering if Yuri has started a new diet. Count Johannes cracks a joke, saying they should get his own son, Got, on whatever meal plan that is. The king returns the favor and praises Got's intellect, but his own father argues that the boy still has a long way to go. Speaking of Got, he's totally mesmerized by Yuri's brother, practically fangirling. As for our main character, he's laser-focused, burning a hole through Got with a death stare that forces the kid to nervously look away. Yuri's other brother senses the tension and questions if something went down between them, picking up on the seriously hostile vibes. The crazy part is, our boy just flat out admits, yeah, this dude stabbed me in the back. Hearing that, his brother roasts Yuri for letting someone like that get away with it, especially after such a deep betrayal. And he's got a point. You can tell Yuri has a special kind of hatred for Got, calling him out for acting all high and mighty, when he's really just a spineless coward. His deadpan expression never cracks. Getting heated, Got finally snaps and shoots back a furious glare, matching that same energy. But instead of blowing up, our boy keeps his cool, reminding himself to handle this situation with his head, not his fists. Because there is absolutely no chance in hell he's going to let this weasel wreck the kingdom of Brielle again, or let the tragedies of his past life play out a second time. On that note, Yuri remembers they actually clashed around this same time in his original life. It was just a stupid squabble back then, but he wonders if that small conflict was the very seed that blossomed into Got's future treason. Next, we see them on the training grounds. Yuri tosses Got a wooden sword, acknowledging the kid's supposed talent with a blade. The little punk tries to downplay his skills, but our boy cuts him off, declaring their kingdom isn't in the business of raising weak or pathetic knights. Got is completely baffled by this, since he's nowhere near becoming a knight. Yuri bluntly informs him that becoming a knight is his destiny, so there's no use denying the inevitable. While the pipsqueak is trying to form a comeback, Yuri launches himself forward at full speed, starting the duel by wielding the most legendary weapon in existence, the almighty stick. Their practice swords collide, and Got immediately calls him a coward for the ambush. But our boy is just getting started. He shows off some serious battle IQ, kicking a spray of dirt right into his rival's face, momentarily blinding Got and creating a killer opening. The annoying brat is sick of being played with, trying to lecture Yuri on the honorable code of the knights. But to his utter shock, our hero literally drops his sword on the ground, a gesture that basically says it all. Weapons? Nah. These hands are all I need to wreck you. Without a moment's hesitation, Yuri lunges forward. One brutal kick sends the kid sprawling to the dirt. Damn, I didn't know you could deliver a bitch slap with your feet. Clutching his wooden training sword, he stands victorious over Got Barkvar, his mind flashing to the future, where this very same kid becomes a full-blown traitor, the one who tossed his family's honor in the trash for the Empire. Yuri looks down at him and straight up says, "Your dad is a legend, a true knight, respected across the entire kingdom. That title isn't just for show, and one day, it could be yours." Extending a hand to Got, Yuri thinks to himself that everyone's got that deep-seated hunger to survive, but he absolutely can't stomach one of his own knights having a spine as weak as Got's. Not this time around. He vows he won't allow any weak links in his ranks, and that includes himself. He hits him with the question again. Why did your father become a count? He doesn't want an answer right now. He wants that question to burn in the back of Gott's mind, to haunt him every single time life gets tough. With that heavy thought hanging in the air, Gott walks away with a new fire in his eyes. Meanwhile, Yuri's brother is completely shook. He can't believe Yuri actually won, openly admitting he was betting on Gott. Sounds savage, right? But you gotta remember, at this point, everyone sees Yuri as nothing more than a lazy, good-for-nothing rich kid. Yuri, obviously, gets pissed, but his brother just shuts him down, reminding him that the whole kingdom knows the third prince as a degenerate gambler and a total menace, so it's not like he's spilling any tea. Fed up, Yuri just snaps. He declares those days are over and tells his brother to cut the crap. The look on his brother's face is a perfect surprised Pikachu meme. Yuri just smirks, soaking in the absolute confusion swirling in his brother's head. A few days later, the Hellscape training sessions with Bernard are still in full swing. By sundown, our boy is completely gassed. With his sword skills coming along, his instructor suggests it's time to level up. It's time to introduce him to a mana method. Yuri's eyes light up, immediately asking if he's finally going to learn Bernard's secret, personal technique. But nope, his teacher shuts that dream down real quick. He insists Yuri isn't ready for something so advanced. Instead, he needs to master the official family technique, the Briar method. Yuri has no clue why, but Bernard swears by it, calling it a perfectly balanced and super efficient technique. But here's the kicker. Yuri already maxed out the Briar method in his past life. Grinding it out again is a total waste of time, not to mention he already hit the skill ceiling with it, back when he was a battle-hardened mercenary. Noticing the flash of frustration on his face, the sword instructor wonders if the prince had a different plan. The gears in Yuri's head turn for a second, and then he knows exactly what to do. He asks the instructor to find him a teacher from the royal guard. This person doesn't need to be some legendary master. They just need to be a diamond in the rough, a well of untapped potential he can learn from, because despite all his experience, there's one specific technique that always escaped his grasp in his past life. Hearing the word potential, the legendary instructor is lost in thought. Finally, a name clicks into place. Jared, the one with more hidden talent than anyone. And just like that, the name Jared unleashes a tidal wave of memories for Yuri. He'd met the guy during the absolute nightmare war from his previous life. Back then, Jared wasn't special. He wasn't a hero. Honestly, he was kind of pathetic. It was a legit miracle he even survived the war. He was always whining to Yuri, even when he was at rock bottom, but even then, Yuri could see it. Jared was sitting on a mountain of monstrous, God-given talent. But reality hits hard. He got lazy, never bothered to sharpen his skills, and all that potential just rotted away into nothing. By the time the war started, he was a sobbing wreck, and Yuri was the one who had to pull him together. In the end, they were both just wasted talent, when the war slammed into them like the legendary Truck-kun himself. Snapping back to the present, a surge of hope rushes through our boy. He decides he's going to find this potential knight and meet him face to face. And speak of the devil, the man is training right now. Yuri's mission: flip the switch in this guy's head and make sure he doesn't waste his life a second time. So, next up, Yuri marches straight over to the Royal Guard training grounds to track Jared down. A senior knight spots the young master's sudden arrival and asks what brings him there. Yuri just plays it cool, saying he came to check on their progress. He's told the knights are grinding hard every single day. Yuri scans the field, watching trainees locked in fierce duels, clashing with raw intensity. But his eyes are searching for only one person. He asks for Jared, but the kid is nowhere to be seen. Doing as he's told, the senior knight gestures over to the rookie, and man, the guy's a total mess. Our boy just heaves a sigh. Suddenly, Bernard's over-the-top reaction from earlier makes perfect sense. Next to the other fighters, Jared's training routine is, to put it mildly, pathetic. Usually, you're supposed to be grinding, pushing your limits, but this dude is literally doing the bare minimum, not even tapping into his real skills. Seeing him just coasting, it's no wonder he becomes a washed-up has-been in that dark future. Yuri turns to the senior knight, Sir Rosso, asking for a wooden sword because he's down to join them for a spar. Rosso's face lights up, totally hyped, and asks which opponent the third prince wants to challenge in his session. And yeah, you guys already know what's coming. Yuri points a finger straight at the slacker and demands a match. A few moments later, the entire arena goes dead silent. The trainees are all taking a break, watching as Jared faces off against his challenger, the young master of the Brielle Kingdom. His buddies are hyping him up, praying Jared will actually try. But the dude just looks annoyed, like this is the last place on earth he wants to be. Yuri speaks to him directly, claiming he's heard rumors about his insane potential as a knight. That's why he came down here personally, to see that power for himself. For Yuri, this is all about seeing Jared's future. Looking tense, Jared accepts the terms of the duel. The fight explodes into action as our boy lunges forward, seizing the offensive. Expecting some incredible display, Jared just waits, not a hint of fear or worry on his face as he stands his ground. He casually parries our boy's swing. Even though the young master is the one attacking, every single one of his opponent's movements is flawlessly calculated, so much so that even Jared's own friends are in total awe of his skill. As the duel rages on, the trainees realize the third prince is holding his own incredibly well for his age and rank, but there's something about the fight itself that has the slacker seriously wondering what is going on. Yuri lashes out again, forcing another block. He can feel that the rhythm of Yuri's attacks isn't just for show. It's completely deliberate. He's actually trying to perfectly match their pace. Before long, the fight becomes kind of repetitive, since all Yuri has done is mirror the exact amount of energy he's getting from the knight. Fed up, Yuri decides to go beast mode and take control, smashing his sword down with so much raw power, it literally knocks the wind out of Jared. That's not even the craziest part. The fact that the rookie knight still managed to block that insane attack just proves what a monster talent he is. Yuri has to admit his opponent's reflexes are on another level, but he isn't finished yet. Shoving Jared back with a wide, powerful swing, he starts to wear the slacker down. Yuri's attacks are completely different now. All of a sudden, Jared stops playing around and starts fighting back, countering every single strike with full force. Yuri is now the one on the back foot, thinking to himself that this was how it was always going to end up. Even with all the knowledge from his past life, it doesn't change the fact that Jared is an absolute powerhouse. Winning was never really an option, and yet, at the same time, our boy has one last card to play. He completely surprises Jared, whipping his blade in a sharp upward strike, sending Jared's sword flying up and creating a massive opening. A grin spreads across his face as the third prince decides he's going to land one clean hit, even if he loses this match. And that is exactly what he does. Dashing forward in a blur, his blade slices past the knight's guard in a clean hit as he celebrates his tiny victory. The other trainees are just speechless. The third prince used brilliant technique to land a solid blow on Jared, and they're all going wild over it. But the fight isn't over. As the young master gets back into his stance, he asks if Jared is still holding back. But instead of arrogance, Jared is just lost in his own head. He thought he was in complete control of this duel, but with every exchange, it felt more and more like he was the one being cornered. Stepping forward once more, a now fiery Jared almost gets tagged again. The third prince taunts him, telling him to try harder, which finally makes the gifted knight snap. In a flash of rage, he channels his mana straight into his weapon. The moment he uses that ability, Saraso and the others scream at him for daring to use such a dangerous skill against the young master. But this guy is beyond reasoning now, his blade pulsing with a deadly aura as it zips past the third prince's neck. If Yuri hadn't been on his toes, he would have been seriously messed up. Jared's fury instantly vanishes, replaced by cold, hard despair. That last attack was so close it sheared off a lock of the young master's hair and left a scratch on his neck. The gravity of his actions hits him like a truck. Jared is getting chewed out for being a psycho who attacked a royal, while a terrified Raso scrambles over to check on Yuri. But instead of making a scene, our boy just plays it off, saying it's the kind of thing that just happens in a spar. He wraps his bleeding cut and tells the knight to pick up his sword again. The fight has barely kicked off when Yuri explodes forward, launching another brutal assault. Their steel sings a sharp song, but the third prince is just toying with him, a smirk playing on his lips as he effortlessly overpowers the knight with every single blow. The knight has never seen this side of the prince, this raw intensity, and he can't help but stack himself up against the royal in his head. One of them was basically coasting through training, barely breaking a sweat, while the other is now fueled by a fire to prove everyone wrong. But check this out, Yuri isn't just defending. He's not cornered. He's having the time of his life, eagerly clashing with Jared again and again. The young master isn't just giving it his all, he's actively pushing himself to go even harder with each attack until they're locked in a dead-even stalemate. But Jared? He's starting to lose it. Pure rage is boiling up inside him. He's never felt a fury this primal before, not even against foes who were leagues stronger. Meanwhile, our boy is looking absolutely legendary, his piercing blue eyes glowing as he shuts down Jared's every move. The knight can't even process it. How is this kid, this prince, pushing him to his absolute breaking point? Speaking of which, Yuri surges forward, unleashing a vicious horizontal slash. Jared ducks, but Yuri gets his revenge for the haircut. A few strands of Jared's hair float to the ground as the knight, enraged, grips his blade and brings it crashing down on the prince with monumental force. I'm pretty sure he's channeling mana, because his sword literally cracks and then shatters Yuri's blade into 1,000 pieces. The duel is over. There's a clear winner. But instead of looking defeated, our boy just stays cool and flashes a grin at his opponent. Jared's battle aura just vanishes. His body heaves, desperate for air after putting out so much power. The young prince extends a hand, admitting he learned a ton from their fight. Jared is still a little shook, but he manages to praise the prince for his insane effort. As they shake on it, the knight realizes Yuri's fighting spirit, his raw ambition, was on a whole other level from anything he'd ever encountered. Hiding inside this young prince's body is an absolute monster of a warrior. He's so lost in thought that he totally forgets he's still gripping Yuri's hand until the kid calls him out, asking why the heck he's acting so chill. After all, Jared's the one who just put a gash on the prince's head. Snapping out of it, Jared basically scrambles away in a panic. But let's be real, that fight wasn't a walk in the park for our protagonist either. The second it's over, he collapses to the ground, completely gassed. The other knights erupt in cheers, hyped by Yuri's incredible performance. Amid the celebration, the captain of the knights, a dude who kinda looks like Bernard, makes his appearance. He immediately clocks the young prince recovering from the intense battle. This is Saint, captain of the Briol Royal Guard, and it looks like our boy has just caught his professional interest. The scene flashes forward a few days. We see Jared walking home after a long shift. Suddenly, a familiar voice stops him in his tracks. It's the third prince, just casually leaning against a wall, waiting for him. Yuri just tells him to follow. He says they have to go somewhere important, but instead of just obeying, Jared actually hesitates, concerned about his training. If he goes with Yuri, he'll miss it. And that, as Yuri points out, is a massive shift in his attitude. It proves Jared is finally starting to care about his own strength. Of course, the third prince immediately claims all the credit for making it happen. So, for this one time, Jared has to come with him. The knight has no choice but to agree. It's not like you can say no to a prince. Meanwhile, our boy is pretty satisfied with the knight's progress. They still have a long way to go though. But hey, it's a solid start. Finally getting curious, the knight asks where they're even headed. Yuri's response? Just shut your mouth and walk. Jared starts sweating, worried the prince is about to drag him into some fresh trouble. But our boy reassures him it's nothing like that, because they won't be going on this little trip alone. The knight wonders who else is coming, just as Yuri spots their guy up ahead and yells out to him. It's the royal family's court mage, Hernando. The sudden shout completely startles him. The kid runs up and declares he needs to go somewhere and demands the mage's help. Hernando is having none of it and is about to shut him down flat, until our boy goes straight for the jugular. He brings up the mage's massive, crippling gambling debt, a debt Yuri could wipe out in a second. Stunned, the mage whips around, wanting to know if he's for real. The prince swears he'll pay off every last cent, and he's not trying to pull a fast one, either. After all, Yuri is famous for never lying. Outside of a gambling den, hearing Hernando confirm his honesty gets Yuri all pumped up, but then reality comes crashing back down. Hernando clarifies that he's only ever seen Yuri lie inside the gambling den, which doesn't exactly make him look trustworthy. Even so, Yuri promises the money is good, so the mage better get on board. Deciding to take the deal, Hernando pulls out a full-blown, legally binding contract for him to sign, making damn sure he's not about to get played. Yuri's face just falls. Our boy is hit with the harsh reality that even being the third prince doesn't mean squat in this world. In a hilarious move, he lists all the potential damages under Jared's name, ordering the knight to handle it. For a second, it looks like poor Jared is getting totally thrown under the bus, but what's actually happening is something else entirely. Turns out, this whole thing is Yuri's master plan to sidestep the contract, using the knight as the official witness to their handshake deal. With the deal locked in, Hernando's geared up and ready to bounce, but there's one tiny problem. He has zero clue where they're actually going. I mean, you don't just drag a knight and a mage on some secret field trip unless it's a code red situation. And finally, after milking the suspense, Yuri spills the tea. Their destination? The legendary Sword Mountain. The mage is completely lost until a tiny, wicked smirk spreads across the young prince's face. He announces they're about to pull off the heist of the century, raiding his own ancestor's dungeon. The scene cuts to them trekking through a decrepit, forgotten tunnel. With Jared leading the charge, Hernando can't help but marvel that a secret passage like this even exists. Tucked away, right beneath the royal palace, Jared glances back at Yuri, asking what exactly is waiting for them at the end of this long, dark cave. The prince just shrugs, cool as a cucumber, and casually drops that it's the entrance to Sword Mountain, a revelation that completely floors the knight. He stammers, asking if it's the Sword Mountain from all the epic tales. Yuri pauses for dramatic effect, then gives a slow nod, confirming it's the one and only. And just like that, Yuri's mind flashes back to his past life, remembering the absolute chaos that erupted when the founder's legacy was first discovered. It happened right after the Empire steamrolled Brio. While scrambling to escape, he'd caught a glimpse of a newspaper headline. It screamed about a dungeon being unearthed inside Sword Mountain. Of course, back then, he'd only used this tunnel to save his own skin, and that legendary legacy fell right into the Empire's greedy clutches. But he wasn't that scared kid just trying to survive anymore. This time around, our boy is on a collision course with the truth, and refuses to glance back. He's locked in, determined to see with his own two eyes what kind of inheritance his ancestors truly left behind. A moment later, we fade in on a lush, vibrant forest that looks like it was ripped straight out of a fantasy, straight from a Disney movie, and Yuri shoves open the massive, rust-eaten doors marking the tunnel's exit. The squad steps into the sprawling woods as Hernando surveys the landscape, asking if this is really where Sword Mountain begins. Then he switches gears, questioning how Yuri even got his hands on the key, while the prince silently remembers that, just like in his previous life, it had been sitting in his study the whole time. But back then, he was clueless about its immense value, a mistake that cost him everything. He just snaps at the mage to stop acting like a gossiping grandma, and drop it. As if on cue, he lets out a sharp yelp of pain when a thorn jabs deep into his palm, and Yuri warns him that the foliage here is literally made of blades, so he better chill out and just follow his lead like a good little soldier. As they forge deeper into the forest, Hernando leans over to Jared, whispering a joke about whether the prince hit his head, or something, because he's been acting super sus lately, a sentiment the knight wholeheartedly shares. But before their gossip sesh can continue, Yuri shouts from up ahead for the two slowpokes to get a move on, proving he still has that same old, bossy attitude. Suddenly, Yuri goes rigid, his eyes catching a flicker of movement in the distance, and he throws up a hand, signaling the duo to freeze in place and stay dead silent. He points toward a huge pack of dire wolves up ahead, who look like they're seconds away from pouncing. He whispers that they hunt in packs, so more could be lurking nearby, and Jared is visibly shocked that the so-called failure prince actually has some useful knowledge. Yuri deadpans that he read it in a book, and Hernando almost faints at the sheer absurdity of picturing Yuri willingly opening a book. Yuri adds that the wolves haven't spotted them yet, so their mission is to sneak by without making a peep, but the universe clearly has other plans, because Hernando takes one step back and lands squarely on the only dry, crunchy twig in the entire forest. It lets out a massive crack that nearly gives the whole squad a collective heart attack. He tries to play it cool, stammering a nervous apology while sweating waterfalls, only for a dire wolf to launch itself from above, ready to make him its next meal. Jared screams his name and dives forward, swinging his sword with enough force to cleanly decapitate the wolf. In a single, savage motion, the beast's body thuds to the ground beside Hernando, and Yuri gives Jared props for infusing mana, since a dire wolf's hide is as tough as steel plate. Unfortunately, that awesome move just put a massive target on his back, as the pack's alpha, a monster way bigger than the others, fixes its gaze on Jared. The colossal wolf lets out a bone-chilling howl, and in an instant, the squad finds themselves completely encircled by the snarling pack. While Jared's knuckles turn white on his sword's hilt, he tells the others to huddle up as he channels his mana once more. The wolves are practically drooling, looking at them like a walking, talking buffet. They all surge forward at once, but Jared is not having any of it. He glares at them with pure killer intent in his eyes and slices a clean path through the horde, without even slowing down. Meanwhile, Hernando compliments the knight's incredible swordplay, and even Yuri has to silently agree, though he thinks to himself that Jared still has a long road ahead. As he watches him fight, Jared finally starts to falter under the relentless assault of the wolves. Seeing this, Yuri finally gives Hernando a shove, telling him to stop being a spectator and start showing off those legendary magic skills his father can't shut up about. That lights a fire under Hernando, who cracks a smile and complains that the prince is really putting his personal battle mage through the ringer today. While conjuring a literal storm of 100 fireballs, Jared glances over his shoulder mid-battle and asks what the hell that's supposed to mean. But his attention whips back in an instant when he spots a rogue fireball hurtling his way, and he narrowly dodges. He dives back as the spell detonates, incinerating the wolf pack in a colossal explosion that reduces the battlefield to a smoking crater. After what felt like an eternity of grinding and carving a path through hordes of grotesque beasts, the squad finally crests the mountain summit. Jared is gasping for air, totally over this non-stop gauntlet of combat. The crew gathers by the cliff's edge to soak in the epic vista, but Jared scans the desolate landscape and asks, "Are we sure this is the spot?" But Yuri is already laser-focused, declaring with total certainty that he knows it is, and immediately starts scouting the terrain. Peeking behind a massive boulder, he finally catches a glint of metal buried in the earth, and his face lights up like he just found the Holy Grail. Wasting zero time, Yuri starts clawing at the dirt, but Jared rushes in to stop him, insisting that's a job for the help. He tries to summon Hernando, but the bougie mage looks absolutely appalled, claiming that manual labor is way below his pay grade, and an insult to his entire profession. A short time later, they finally unearth their prize, and Yuri hefts the sword from the ground, gawking at the gleaming, priceless-looking weapon with a twinkle in his eye. Hernando goes full Sherlock Holmes. He points out that it looks brand new, almost like someone had just dropped it off recently. Yuri's eyes narrow. He notices an inscription near the hilt, The single word guilty is etched into the steel. Jared wanders over and asks if this is really the legendary heirloom, but Yuri is still sizing up the weapon, not quite convinced. Out of nowhere, the whole mountain starts to shake violently, sending everyone into high alert as Yuri smirks and says, "Looks like we're about to find out." A massive chasm rips through the ground beneath them, and Jared lets out the most extra, high-pitched shriek as they're all sent plummeting into the darkness. The Royal Knight screams his head off the entire way down until he makes a very ungraceful landing, right in front of an ominous-looking tunnel. Yuri snaps awake to find himself cushioned by his Royal Knight, who'd clearly used his own body as an airbag during the fall, and starts to scramble off as Jared groans about every single bone in his body aching. Total boomer moment. Yuri instantly realizes he must have beefed up his body with mana, calling the feat pretty damn impressive, right before the knight promptly passes out from the sheer strain. Few seconds later, Hernando gracefully descends from the sky like some magical nanny, and comments that this pit is way deeper than he thought it would be. Yuri shoots him a death glare and mutters, under his breath, how the guy totally ditched the prince to save his own skin. Hernando frantically tries to backpedal with some pathetic excuses, but before he can launch into his full-blown defense argument, an unnatural sound echoes from the tunnel, and the battle mage spins around to see some seriously cursed entity slithering out of the shadows. He desperately tries to warn Yuri, who's convinced he's just trying to change the subject, but Hernando insists that he's being dead serious, and just screams that it's a frickin' ghost, which finally gets Yuri's attention as he whips around in a panic. And yep, a towering, armored figure that looks like it just stepped out of a nightmare is slowly stalking towards them, radiating a terrifying deathly aura, and Yuri instantly identifies it as a Death Knight. Staring it down, he orders Jared to get his butt up, now, though the knight is still knocked out cold, and just mumbles something incoherent. A well-placed kick to the ribs, however, jolts him awake with a start. Jared's eyes go wide the second he spots the terrifying apparition, and he dramatically leaps in front of the prince, shouting that he'll take care of the Death Knight. While Yuri is low-key not impressed, the Death Knight grinds to a halt right before them as Yuri's gaze intensifies. He recalls that these beings were once living knights, only to be reanimated after death, making them way more powerful than they ever were alive. But he also senses this one isn't giving off hostile vibes, so he decides on a calm approach. Jared is high-key questioning this plan, but Yuri just shrugs, saying he's got a feel for these things, and explains how it would be super weird for the Founder's own guardians to randomly attack his descendants. Locking eyes with the spectral warrior, he announces his name with absolute authority. The Death Knight seems to be buffering for a hot second, processing this display of audacity, before it suddenly whips out its massive sword, immediately sending the other two into a full-blown panic. But there's no time to react, as the Death Knight brings its blade down hard on the prince, who is too shocked to even move. But instead of slicing him in two, the blade slams into the ground just inches from his face, giving him a seriously close shave. Hernando absolutely loses it, wailing that the prince has just been tragically decapitated. Yuri tells him to chill, but the mage is now crying about the prince's ruined haircut. The ancient skeleton finally speaks, sheathing its sword and muttering that Yuri has the exact same cocky attitude as the last guy. "Who even are you?" Yuri demands, and the Death Knight reveals a skeletal face, announcing, "I am Eric Briol." The name hits the room like a physical blow, leaving everyone absolutely floored. "Eric Briol?" Jared whispers, his mind completely blown, while Hernando goes into full-on lore nerd mode, explaining that this is the one, the only, the absolute legend himself. No one in the kingdom could ever forget the man who single-handedly conquered the entire continent. The absolute unit, who literally founded the Briol kingdom. He was its very first king. Yuri snaps to attention, cutting straight to the point. "Are you the first one who ever made it this far?" The Death Knight gives a skeletal nod, adding that only a person with the true blood of Briol could ever hope to draw that sword in the first place. And just like that, everything clicks into place for Yuri. His suspicions are confirmed. This blade is the legendary heirloom of his ancestors. He lifts the sword, inspecting its ancient craftsmanship, only for the Death Knight to casually remark, "Oh yeah, I used that one back in the day." The comment is a total vibe killer, and a flash of annoyance crosses Yuri's face, which leaves the ancient skeleton utterly perplexed. But our boy just apologizes for grabbing his stuff. The skeleton's entire demeanor then shifts, dropping the formal act, as he asks Yuri to be real about why he journeyed all the way here. Yuri's knuckles turn white on the hilt as he declares his full name and demands that the knight surrender the Founder's legacy. The Death Knight just stares for a long, heavy moment before his gaze drifts toward a massive, glowing crystal nearby. With all the drama of a season finale, he announces that his long vigil is finally over. He will grant Yuri exactly what he came for. The prince feels a bead of sweat trickle down his neck as he starts to follow the ancient king. Jared, meanwhile, is completely zoned out. He's just silently trying to process all the paranormal insanity, realizing this royal guard gig is way more than he bargained for. Yuri glances back and yells his name, snapping him out of his 1,000-yard stare, and leaving the poor guard looking totally shaken. He's suddenly hit with bizarre flashes of a past life he never even had. He scratches his head, half convinced he's officially losing his mind. But he shouts back that he's on his way and sprints after the prince. Just as the Death Knight steps before the crystal, he slowly lowers himself to his knees before it, as if the weight of centuries finally caught up to him, striking a pose that radiates pure, unfiltered power. The crystal erupts in a blinding flash of light, forcing the squad to shield their eyes as the skeleton's voice booms. Let us hope the prince is truly worthy. In an instant, Yuri's world dissolves. He finds himself in a barren, desert-like dimension, spinning around in a sheer panic. He's wondering where on earth he's been sent when he spots a figure approaching in the distance, a flicker of hope sparking that it might be the founder. But that hope gets vaporized when he sees the thing isn't even human and is already charging at him at full speed, sword in hand. He barely gets his own sword up in time to block the attack, grunting from the sheer force of the blow. His eyes lock onto a glowing blue orb in the creature's chest, and he stares in total disbelief, realizing the thing is wielding a sword made of pure mana. The transparent warrior then points directly to the glowing blue core embedded in its chest, leaving Yuri totally baffled. But it doesn't end there. The ethereal glow begins to pulse from the orb, coursing through its clear body before igniting its sword with the same brilliant light. Yuri keeps his own sword raised defensively, but it's dawning on him that he's not just in a fight, he's witnessing the actual method to wield mana itself. His confusion only deepens when the strange being suddenly gestures right at him. "Are you serious?" he yells at it. "You want me to copy you right now? We're kind of in the middle of a duel." Scratching his head, Yuri mutters that the founder must have been completely unhinged before he died. The whole idea of throwing someone who's never even used a mana technique into a live combat situation to teach them is just flat out insane. It sounds like the kind of high-risk, high-reward strategy only someone on their second life would even come up with. And then it clicks. That someone might actually be him. Yuri drops into a crouch, his focus sharpening like a razor. He starts channeling mana into his palm, watching it cast a soft glow. But then, he's stuck. He has no idea what to do next. Trying to puzzle out the technique, he raises his sword and calls out to the featureless figure. "I'm still not getting it," he shouts. "Show me again, but do it right this time." What he gets in response is a chillingly wide, inhuman grin. As the creature lifts its glowing sword once more, Yuri understands with cold certainty that he has to get stronger. Right now, no matter what it takes. He faces off against the warrior, swearing to himself that when the Empire inevitably reveals its true colors and tries to invade Brioel, things will be different. He refuses to repeat the failures of his past. This time, he will completely and utterly destroy them. He'll do it even if it means sacrificing his own life. His grip on the sword tightens. "This must be the swordsmanship of the ancestor king," he mutters quietly. And with that, all his hesitation vanishes. He surges forward like a bolt of lightning, slashing with intense concentration as he vows to absorb every single technique his opponent uses. His brutal training session against the faceless fighter begins all over again. Meanwhile, Jared's eyes slowly flutter open to a completely alien space, and he looks around with a deeply confused expression. He quickly puts together that he's standing in what seems to be a training ground, his eyes scanning the empty arena for any sign of life. He stops dead in his tracks, commenting that this entire place feels way too vivid to be some kind of dream. His gut screams that something is wrong, and he grips his sword, yelling for whatever is hiding, to drop the scaredy cat act and show itself. That's when footsteps sound from behind, and he whips around, ready to throw down, only to freeze when he's met with the sight of his own face staring back at him. He scoffs, wondering out loud if this is the Death Knight's idea of some twisted trial. He calmly asks the copy for its name, and if it's also supposed to be Jared. At last, the doppelganger speaks, telling him he shouldn't be trying to defy his destiny, which completely floors Jared. The clone smugly asks if he didn't sign up for the Royal Guards, just to chase a cushy life, filled with riches. It continues, saying he needs to stay the hell away from the third prince, and warns that the more he fights his fate, the more tragic his life will become, all while Jared just glares back in stone-cold silence. Taking a huge breath, he glances down at his blade, and admits that maybe, the old version of himself would have eaten all that up. But he's a different man now. A montage of every grueling sparring match with the prince flashes through his mind, and a massive grin explodes across his face, as he roasts the fake for being so salty, drops some poetic wisdom, and declares that once a blade is swung, the only thing that matters is the next swing. Because getting hung up on what's already done will only mess with your head. The fake Jared isn't having it, igniting his mana sword with a sneer and calling him arrogant. He bolts forward, unleashing a powerful jab, but Jared effortlessly deflects it as their swords clash with a piercing shriek. Jared immediately sees the pattern. thinking about how painfully boring his copy is, playing it safe, dumping all its stats into defense. The clone leaps into the air for an attack, but Jared reads the telegraphed move a mile away. It makes him think about how ridiculously dull he used to be, and he lands a perfect counter that sends the double slamming into the ground. Jared lets out a victorious breath, but keeps his guard up. Good thing, too. The fake suddenly begins to liquefy into a dark, gooey sludge, and the real Jared watches with narrowed eyes as it morphs into a gigantic slime monster. He realizes the warm-up is over. The knight stares down the colossal goo creature and mutters that it's just another loud-mouthed brute, silently praying that the prince is handling his own business. Readying his blade, he braces for impact, and sends a mental shout-out for Yuri to hang on and claim his victory. Meanwhile, back in the wasteland, the ground is absolutely shredded from the barrage of sword strikes, and Yuri is laid out in a crater, not moving a single muscle. The translucent being stands over him, sword in hand, and stalks forward with pure menace. Yuri seems completely out of it, showing zero reaction, but the faceless warrior couldn't care less. It heaves its sword high overhead and brings it smashing down, unleashing a cataclysmic explosion that shakes the very ground. However, in the split second before the transparent figure's sword connects, Yuri drops the act, his knuckles white as he grips his own sword. Pumping it full of mana, he thrusts it directly at the creature with the reflexes of an acrobat. The entity manages to bend backward in a physics-defying dodge, but the attack still triggers a massive explosion of mana. As agile as ever, the faceless fighter hops back to create some distance, while Yuri lets out a ragged breath. Finally getting a second to think, he has no idea how long this insane duel has been going on. He admits that his last move was a reckless Hail Mary, and incredibly stupid, but the way he slashed, the way raw power coursed through his blade, and especially the way he fought, like his life was on the line with every single clash. That's what made everything finally click into place. He stares down at the blade, now practically humming with energy, sensing he's had a breakthrough. But before he can even savor the moment, his attention is yanked away, as he sees the transparent warrior begin to crack. Its sword shatters into a million tiny fragments, as its body starts to disintegrate, and Yuri understands instantly. Its time is up. Dust and particles begin to flake away from its limbs, and just before it vanishes, it raises a hand in a final, silent wave. The prince watches the remains scatter on the wind, with a strange, faint smile on his face. He closes his eyes and offers a quiet thank you to his faceless mentor, just as his own form begins to dissolve as well. A moment later, Yuri groans as his eyes flutter open, blinking away the haze as he looks around, totally lost. His companions are also waking up, looking like they all just went through their own personal hell, and it hits him. They're finally back in reality. The Death Knight watches them with a smug look, remarking that it seems they all had a nice little dream. Yuri is still pretty out of it, but manages to ask what in the world that was. He's told it was all part of the Founder's master plan, a trial he left behind specifically for any of his descendants who might one day reach this place. Yuri's mind flashes back to his past life, when the Empire completely annihilated Sword Mountain, which explains why he'd never heard of this. Yuri's mind raced, wondering why the entire Brielle lineage had let this incredible legacy just sit here and collect dust. He shot a question at the Death Knight. Did the Founder himself use this insane mana technique? But the Knight shot him down. The Founder never used it. Instead, this was his ultimate masterpiece. After scouring the entire world, he cherry-picked every skill he considered worthy and fused them all into a single, perfect technique. Yuri is the very first soul to ever inherit it, and the prince looks absolutely stunned. He then voices the million-dollar question. Why didn't the Founder just hand this power down to his own royal descendants directly? The skeleton explains. The dungeon's gates only unseal when the time is right. The fact that it opened now signals that this power is desperately needed in the world. Yuri presses him, asking what that timing is all about. But the knight completely stonewalls him, declaring it's not his place to spill those secrets. That's a puzzle Yuri has to piece together all on his own. His focus snaps back to the blade, his eyes filled with awe as he asks for its name. The Death Knight reveals its chilling title, Soul Severance. The name hangs heavy in the air, but before Yuri can even process it, the knight commands him to bend the knee. His tone isn't a suggestion, it's an order, and his overpowering aura makes it crystal clear he's not messing around. On pure instinct, Yuri drops to his knees without a second thought. The Death Knight places a skeletal hand on the boy's head and begins to recite the ancient vow. He tells Yuri to never show fear before his enemies, and the prince's response is a rock-solid yes. The knight's voice continues to echo, commanding him to always follow his convictions and, no matter what happens, to fulfill the duty of Brielle until his very last breath. Then, out of nowhere, the knight's grip tightens, yanking Yuri's head back as he orders him to burn the next words into his very soul, that a Brielle never, ever casts aside their honor, even if the price is their own life. With those final, booming words, The Death Knight's form begins to crumble into dust, his ancient mission finally complete. His voice fades out with one last line. This is the oath of Brielle. Meanwhile, Yuri is frozen, able to do nothing but stare as the legendary guardian fades into nothingness. The next morning, his maid bursts into the room, yanks the curtains open, and announces that the sun is up. Yuri groans from beneath his blankets in protest. She asks if he's exhausted, pointing out that he apparently stumbled home crazy late last night, and warns him not to even think about lying back down, or he'll be out for the count again. Yuri lets out a huge yawn. He explains that he made a pit stop at the Royal Archives, which is the reason he got in so late. The maid looks intrigued and asks him what for. He replies that he was hunting down a specific record after digging through the family's ancient archives the night before. Turns out, Yuri had stumbled upon some major family tea. The record claimed the founder had a sibling, someone who completely ditched their honor, and was then basically erased from the history books, vanishing without a single trace. Gazing at the sword in his hands, Yuri connects the dots. That brother must have been the Death Knight, and this powerful sword must have originally belonged to him. The maid cuts through his thoughts, reminding him to get dressed, because the king himself is waiting for him. That news makes Yuri's heart practically leap out of his chest. She adds that she isn't sure of the details, but right after Hernando's meeting with His Majesty, the king immediately sent for him. Yuri starts sweating absolute buckets. He's mentally cursing Hernando's name as the disastrous events from the previous night come flooding back. He can still see Hernando's smug face, telling him straight up that he was going to tattle on every single detail to the king. Yuri had begged, asking if that was really necessary, but the guy just smirked and said he was kind of feeling like it was. Yuri grabs his head, completely stressed out. He realizes with dawning horror that Hernando must have already spilled everything. A little later, inside the ridiculously shiny royal hall, Yuri stands underneath a chandelier that looks expensive enough to bankrupt an entire city and announces that he has arrived as summoned. The king is just sitting there, scratching his head, looking like he has no clue what to do with his son. He starts by confirming the obvious. Hernando had already told him the whole story. He then chews Yuri out for sneaking away from the palace, not to mention the fact he somehow located the secret dungeon and emerged with the founder's freaking legacy. Yuri doesn't bother denying it. He just admits it's all true. But that answer doesn't satisfy the king. He rises from his throne, his gaze intense, and asks if he truly found that legendary sword down there. Yuri confirms it once again. His Majesty begins walking toward him slowly, his tone turning dangerously low, as he states that lately, he's been hearing from a whole lot of people that Yuri has changed a lot. The king's eyes narrow as he starts rattling off a list of names, every single person who reported on Yuri's sudden personality shift, with the final nail in the coffin being, of course, Hernando. Placing a heavy hand on his son's head, the king commands him to speak, demanding to know what, in the world, could have possibly triggered such a massive transformation. Yuri gulps, his nerves shot, clutching his sword tighter as he stays silent. The king refuses to back down and presses him again, asking if he simply doesn't want to give him a reason. Yuri stammers that, it's not like that, but the king cuts him right off, wondering why he's hesitating. The prince finally replies that he's terrified because His Majesty has been clenching his fist this entire time. Realizing he's been caught, the king forces his hand to relax and tells him to just spit it out already. Yuri finally cracks and says that he had a dream. The word immediately puts the king on high alert, but Yuri continues. In the dream, he confessed to a sin that could never be forgiven. The king's expression remained skeptical, rolling the phrase over in his mind. Using his full government name, his father, Fiore Brion, demanded to know what unforgivable act could have triggered such a massive shift in his personality. Yuri locked eyes with him, the silence in the room stretching on for what felt like an eternity. And then he finally broke, admitting his sin was utterly failing to protect Brielle in that nightmarish vision. He described a kingdom plunged into the inferno of war, where countless innocents were mercilessly slaughtered. The prince fought to shift the tides, to make a stand, but was completely crushed. In the end, after Brielle had fallen, he fled like a coward, stripped of all honor, and died a pathetic, broken man. He gripped his chest, the memory sharp as glass, and explained that when he finally awoke from the horror, the necklace his mother had given him was just gone. That was the moment he knew this was more than just a dream. It was a warning, sent from his mother herself. The king looked visibly disturbed by this and pressed him, asking which power was the one that brought his kingdom to ruin in the vision. A wave of panic washed over Yuri. He knew it was way too soon to name the empire. A tiny, fragile hope still existed that he could delay the invasion, or maybe even prevent it entirely if he played his cards perfectly. So he deflected, claiming he couldn't be sure. He just described a mysterious black army that swarmed them out of nowhere. A quiet sigh escaped the king's lips, followed by a faint smile. He told Yuri it was likely just a terrible nightmare, maybe even a message from his mother, but he was proud to see his son finally deciding to step up. But Yuri wasn't convinced. He knew, deep in his gut, that this entire fight was for a single purpose: to earn forgiveness for the sin of abandoning Brielle and its people to their fate. His dark thoughts were suddenly cut short as the king's posture straightened, announcing that there was another matter they needed to settle immediately. His Majesty crossed his arms, his voice like cold steel as he commanded Yuri to draw his sword. Fiore Brion was a true prodigy, a man who was probably swinging a blade before he could even form proper sentences, a walking disaster on the battlefield, who conquered everything and everyone in his path. His name was carved across the continent with pure, unrivaled skill and raw power, possessing a level of martial artistry that shouldn't belong to a single human being. Back in the day, when people debated the 10 strongest warriors alive, Fiore was the guy who casually sat at the very top of that list. As Yuri stood in the training hall, facing down this living legend, it finally clicked. His old man was arguably the greatest sword master on the entire continent. He scanned the room, completely awestruck, and mumbled that he had never once set foot in his father's personal training space. Fiore shot back that he never imagined any of his children would possess the talent for swordsmanship in the first place. Yuri gritted his teeth at the insult, muttering that he did have talent, which earned him a long, weary sigh from the king, who just repeated the word back to him. Then, without any warning, he raised his own sword, the tip aimed directly at the prince's throat, catching him completely by surprise. He began listing off the basic physical traits, things like speed, reflexes, and raw instinct, and then posed a question. Did possessing all of those things automatically make one the ultimate swordsman? With the cold steel still pressed against Yuri's neck, he answered his own question. None of that was the key. The single most critical element is the drive that relentlessly pushes a warrior beyond their absolute limits. His gaze intensified, growing heavier, as he clarified that this drive transcends mere duty or expectations. But then, his eyes began to glow a menacing red, and Yuri's entire body went rigid. He felt the crushing pressure exploding from his father, the entire aura in the room twisting into something absolutely terrifying. Fiore lowered his sword, admitting that he lacked the words to truly describe that feeling, so he gave it a simple name instead: the sword's calling. Yuri just stared, his mind reeling, as he lowered his own blade and quietly asked if he meant something like destiny. Fiore closed his eyes, conceding that it could be interpreted that way. Yuri fell silent, his thoughts spiraling once more, remembering that in his past life, he was never fated to wield a sword. He couldn't help but wonder what had changed. His gaze suddenly flickered down to the blade in his hands, as if he could find the answer he was looking for. Within its polished reflection, Fiore's voice sliced through the silence with another question. Did Yuri even have the right to hold that sword? He pressed harder, his voice demanding, asking if Yuri could hear that calling, and whether he would have the guts to hold onto that sword, even when staring death right in the face. Yuri was completely shaken, stumbling over his words as he tried to respond, admitting that he couldn't feel anything at all. In return, he was met with the piercing, ice-cold gaze of his father, a look so frightening, it made him take an involuntary step back on shaky legs. In that instant, it felt like he was being watched by countless evil eyes, closing in from all sides. He began to completely break down. The absolute worst memories from his past life came roaring back like a tsunami, replaying the screams of his loyal soldiers telling him to dodge, to run for his life, while others cried out for a savior who never came. Their voices called to him, but the words couldn't reach him. In a nauseating flash, the world around him warps, and he's plunged back into his old life, an inferno where everything he knew was turning to ash. The Empire's soldiers march relentlessly, their iron boots trampling the lifeless body of Hernandos into the dirt. They slaughter civilians without a shred of hesitation, while Yuri's older self can only stand there, a phantom watching his world burn. He lets out a sharp gasp, his eyes darting around in sheer terror, the one question screaming in his mind: why is Brielle burning? Out of the chaos, a voice yells, "It's the third prince. Over there, the last surviving royal of the Brielle family." In an instant, enemy eyes lock onto him, and the soldiers start closing in for the kill. He stares down at his own hands, watching them tremble uncontrollably. That's when the brutal reality crashes down on him like an avalanche. Somehow, he's been dragged back to the exact moment his home was annihilated. Brielle is being razed to the ground, and the Imperial army is on a manhunt for its last prince. Yuri's mind is spinning, a vortex of horror and disbelief, as he realizes he's trapped in this living nightmare once again, hunted for being the final spark of Briollian hope, the only heir who could possibly reclaim the lost honor of his kingdom. The kid is frozen solid, totally shell-shocked, trying to process how it's even possible he's back here. The Imperial army is just itching to put him in the ground. One of them even lunges from the shadows, aiming to take his head clean off, but Yuri feels that murderous intent creeping up his spine, and rips his sword free just in the nick of time. He pivots, dodging the deadly strike with a professional grace that barely saves his neck. Now it's a brutal symphony of clashing steel, a raw contest of strength as Yuri fights desperately to hold his ground. With one powerful swing, he slices the Imperial soldier's throat wide open. One threat eliminated, but before he can even catch his breath, he hears the roar of his own men shouting, throwing themselves into the fight to shield their prince. They're screaming at him to run, to get out while they buy him precious seconds. He can't bear to leave them, not like this, but their eyes are pleading with him to go. And one by one, amidst the roaring flames, the Imperial army butchers them. Yuri's head is reeling. Is this still just some twisted nightmare? He questions if this crushing defeat is truly the fate Briol was doomed to suffer. Drowning in helplessness, he finally accepts that this isn't over yet, but also knows there's nothing he can do to stop it. Something inside of him fractures. The last prince of Briol stands before the smoldering corpse of his fallen kingdom, a kingdom he couldn't protect. At the same time, the Imperial army charges from behind, certain this is their moment to extinguish the Briolian royal line for good. Yuri sees them coming, his knuckles turning white as he grips his sword. He knows this battle is far from over, but he's already forged a vow in the heart of this inferno. No matter what happens, he swears he will never fear the enemy again. With that fire reignited in his eyes, Prince Yuri turns to face the approaching legion, as a voice deep in his soul pushes him forward, reminding him to stand for what he believes in. That voice echoes through his mind, drilling in the absolute truth that he has a duty to Briole, and he will see it through to the bitter end. Yuri clenches his blade and charges at them. At full speed, his strike a silver blur that slices through armor and flesh in a single, fluid motion. The scum from the Imperial army drops dead on the spot, their blood splashing across Yuri's eyes and nearly blinding him. But even with his vision smeared red, the kid manages to block a soldier's spear, with his bare hand just in the nick of time. Seizing the opening, Yuri drives his sword straight into the soldier's gut. Breathing hard, he hears a voice whisper in his mind, telling him to prepare for death, that his time is up. It's begging him to just give up, but a roar of raw pain and defiance rips from his throat. Briol will never throw away its honor, even if it means dying for it. With that burning fury, Yuri lunges at the Imperial army like a cornered beast, ready to carve their graves into the dirt right then and there, to fulfill Briole's duty. In that exact moment, little Yuri mumbles that he will protect Briole's honor, until the very end. Fiore's voice cuts through the chaos, waking the poor kid up and asking if he can hear him. One loud shout of Yuri's name shatters the illusion. The shaken boy blinks, finding himself staring at the Black Army, while his father, Fiore, gently brings him back to reality. He explains that it was all an illusion. The moment Yuri grabbed the sword, it triggered a horrifyingly tragic memory, and now his hand is drenched in a cold sweat. From the haunted look in his son's eyes, his father seems to realize he might have been dead wrong about him, and now he wants Yuri to take up the sword for real. Little Yuri cracks a smile, saying he's already made his decision, but then he pauses, a little weirded out by the strange look on his father's face. Seriously, anyone looking at him would think Yuri had just cheerfully signed his own death warrant. Without warning, the boy tugs on his father's sleeve and tells him to chill. The old man is caught completely off guard, floored by the absolute guts his son has to give him. A reality check like that. Little Yuri bursts out laughing and declares with total confidence, "I'm a genius." In response, his father's face twitches, right before he gives Yuri a solid bonk on the head. Later that morning, under the soft glow of the sunrise, a pleasant breeze blows across the field. Bernard ambles over and spots young Yuri nursing a lump on his head with some ice. He can't resist asking who the genius was behind that little injury. Yuri just shrugs, casually mentioning it was his dad's doing. Bernard shakes his head, cracking a joke that his father must be in a particularly giving mood today. But then the mood shifts. Bernard gets serious, warning Yuri that the real training starts now, no more kid gloves. Yuri just meets his gaze, completely unfazed. He's been waiting for this. It suddenly clicks for Yuri. Looking back, he figures the only reason a guy like Bernard would stick around a place like Briol had to be because of his father. Seizing the opportunity, Yuri finally voices his suspicion, asking if Bernard had to agree to some crazy condition, like a duel with his dad, to get him to stay in Briol. Without missing a beat, the old man confirms it. A simple yes. So Yuri immediately discards that theory and presses on, asking if he would have stayed even without the condition. Bernard's answer is instant. A cold, hard no. Bernard just lets out a laugh when Yuri calls him heartless. Deep down, the old warrior knows the young prince is just desperate for him to stay. So Bernard plays along, saying he might just entertain the idea if Yuri can give him a compelling enough reason. Something truly enticing will do. He hints that these old bones of his could be persuaded to forget their other plans. The offer sends a jolt through little Yuri. But then Bernard's expression sharpens. He zeroes in on the kid's real desire, asking if what he truly wants is to learn the way of the sword. The question freezes Yuri in his tracks. Bernard goes quiet, lost in thought. You can practically see the gears turning in his head as a plan starts to form. He's genuinely intrigued to see where this goes. For Yuri, the idea is terrifying. I mean, this is the man they call the Sword Demon. The weight of that title is crushing. But the old man just shrugs it off, saying it doesn't matter if Yuri hasn't mastered a single thing. He'll factor that in. Yuri mutters that it probably won't do much good, but then he draws his sword. He reveals his unique style. Swordsmanship literally fused with mana. A shimmering aura of mana envelops the blade, flowing through the steel itself. Bernard is floored. He confesses he's never witnessed or even conceived of anything like it. In all his years, he's only known mana to be a tool to amplify one's sword skills, never an integral part of the blade itself. Yuri explains that's precisely what makes the technique nearly impossible to teach. It always gets passed down in a fragmented, incomplete state. But Bernard shocks him, saying he doesn't care. He'll take it, flaws and all. In fact, he declares that this will be his new condition for staying in Briolle. At the bare minimum, he's certain he can grasp at least a piece of the puzzle. Struck by the old man's sheer confidence, Yuri agrees. Bernard's stay in Briolle is now official. The deal is struck. With business out of the way, Bernard tells the kid to show him what he's got, and falls into a ready stance. Yuri Briolle tightens his grip on his sword and begins to demonstrate his Simhanchum technique. But right in the middle of his form, Bernard casually drops an absolute bombshell. Turns out, he was never going to leave Briolle anyway. His Majesty himself had already requested that he remain for another 10 years. The truth slams into Yuri like a freight train. He realizes he's been completely and utterly played. Before Yuri can even process the betrayal, Bernard flashes a wicked smirk and reminds him that he's supposed to be attacking. But Yuri's had enough. He's done waiting. He lunges first. This old troll is seriously pushing all his buttons. He counters Bernard's strike with every ounce of his strength, their blades colliding with a deafening shriek of steel on steel. That night, Yuri lies awake in bed, his mind racing. For the first time, he feels it. A subtle but undeniable shift in the currents of fate. This isn't the same timeline that ends with Briolle in ashes, a future forged by his own failures. He hasn't made any grand moves yet, but getting Bernard to stay is the first real proof that things are different now. The future always felt like this monolithic, untouchable thing, but now, he can feel it starting to crack, changing bit by bit. Still, a voice in the back of his mind tells him it's not nearly enough. His resolve hardens. He's going to make the entire empire bow before him, whatever it takes. And just as he's lost in his dark ambitions, Ina suddenly appears. She's here with a simple plea. Please, no more drama. But Yuri just narrows his eyes and asks what other plots she's cooking up. Ina, totally unfazed by his paranoia, points out how he's always looking for an angle to get her help. Then, she pivots, dropping the news that there's an Elders Council meeting tomorrow. She gives him a look, saying she hopes he didn't forget. You can tell she's so over his games. That's when his father chimes in, casually adding that Yuri will be attending as well. This is the first he's hearing of it. Ina presses on, reminding him it's bright and early, and that basically the entire council will be there. Just then, she leans in, grabbing Yuri's hand. Her eyes are twinkling with mischief as she warns him the room will be packed with intimidating old geezers. But she's got one simple request. Try not to punch any of them. He lets out a nervous laugh, promising her she has nothing to worry about how he's a changed man. And with that, he gives Ina his word that he's going to stay in line. The next day at the Elders Council, the first thing Yuri clocks is the insane level of hostility. Welp, Ina was 100% right about this. Duke Chenard is the first to fire a shot, putting the prince's mana method on blast for everyone to hear. The old geezer absolutely trashes the idea of the prince learning some unproven mana technique. This council was supposed to be for national affairs, but it has completely lost the plot. It's devolved into nothing but a pathetic attempt to kneecap royal authority. And it finally clicks for Yuri, why his father always dodged these meetings. Duke Chenard Lettery of the West pipes up, demanding that Yuri just stick with the traditional Brielle method. One of the royal family's allies immediately claps back, arguing that this so-called unproven technique is the actual legacy of their founder. The puffed-up Duke demands cold, hard proof to back that up, and you can tell the prince's ally is getting seriously pissed. The Duke is basically calling the prince a liar, but he tries to play it off as just being concerned for Yuri's future. Total gaslighting. Yuri can't lie. It's kinda hilarious watching the entire Elders Council have a collective meltdown over his training regimen. It's almost flattering, especially since this is the same guy who was bowing and scraping before the Emperor after Brielle fell, and now he's suddenly got a spine. The irony is off the charts. The Duke then pivots, demanding to hear from Saint Ed, the captain of the Royal Guard. The Saint, trying his best not to pick a side, just says he's not really sure. He explains that every mana method has its pros and cons, and it all depends on the user. The Duke immediately pounces on that. He twists the Saint's words, claiming that if even the Royal Guard captain has his doubts, they should just shut the whole thing down. But Yuri's ally instantly counters, saying that all Saint Ed meant was that every mana style has its own merit. Then the Duke's lackey jumps in, accusing the other side of being terrified the method will actually harm the prince. Yuri feels the vibe in the room go sour real fast, and he is not here for it. In the span of a few seconds, the entire council had turned into a pack of wolves, ready to tear him apart. If he hadn't already poured so much work into this mana method, he'd be forced to rebuild his entire core from square one. But since he stayed true to the founder's vision, his Simhanchum was already deeply ingrained in his very being. Still, Yuri is stunned into silence. He's totally frozen, unsure of his next move as the pressure from the council bears down on him. Just when the silence becomes suffocating, a voice slices through the chamber. It's sharp and slick, musing that these guys sure know how to talk a big game. Every head whips around to see Free Baron Calcio Arancia striding into the hall, a cocky smirk plastered on his face. He throws a question out to the whole room. Which one of you has actually ever fought an orc? Instantly, all attention is locked on Calcio. The atmosphere shifts as some of the nobles start whispering. Duke Gennard raises a skeptical eyebrow. He demands to know who this guy is and what his rank is, basically trying to figure out if he's even worthy of being in the same room. Calcio Arancia just strolls forward and nonchalantly introduces himself as a free baron. The Duke looks floored. He's practically offended that some low-level scrub would have the audacity to show up at the Elders' Council. Calcio admits he didn't plan on coming either, but he was given a direct order from Count Seymour himself. At the mention of that name, Yuri's eyes fly open. That name triggers a memory. He's the Border Count, the man who defends the brutal outer frontiers of Brielle. A lord famous for fighting on the absolute front lines, the guy is a straight-up living legend, a true warrior who has lived his life on the battlefield. And now his name is being dropped in this stuffy hall, even though Yuri knows for a fact that Count Seymour has zero interest in these kinds of noble parties. He can't piece together why the man would even waste his time sending a representative here. The prince's ally beats him to it, demanding to know why Count Seymour sent Calcio. With a sly grin, Calcio jokes that Seymour just wanted him to watch a bunch of snooty nobles run their mouths about politics without ever getting their hands dirty. And after witnessing this whole disaster, he says it's all starting to make perfect sense. Why Seymour sent only him. Then, his tone shifts dramatically. Calcio explains that, on a real battlefield, the name of your mana method is worthless. It doesn't matter if it's the Empire's Lion Fang art or Brielle's classic style. The only thing that counts is the skill of the person using it. He then turns to Yuri, saying he wants to hear the prince's own take on the situation. Taking his chance, Yuri steps forward and declares his intention to master the founding king's mana method. He's just baffled as to why it's sparking so much drama in the first place. And with that, Prince Brio makes his stance crystal clear. No matter what these old fools say, he's going all in on the founder's technique. One way or another, Calcio continues, saying the prince holding the sword is obviously dead set on honoring the will and style of their founder. He then adds that most of the people in this room have neither the right nor the right to weigh in on things that don't even involve them. He throws a calculated jab at the pampered nobles, chained to their desks, declaring that anyone who's never set foot on a battlefield should just shut up. Duke Gennard remarks that the free-spirited baron has a sharp tongue. In response, Calcio just cracks a smile and says, butchering orcs tends to erode one's politeness, hoping the Duke can forgive his lack of manners. He then steers the conversation right back to his original challenge, demanding to know who in the room has ever actually taken down an orc. The chamber is plunged into a heavy, awkward silence. Calcio doubles down on the pressure, making it brutally clear that monsters couldn't care less about their sophisticated mana techniques. The sheer intensity in his voice sends a ripple of anxiety through the room. The Duke's right-hand man concedes Calcio's point but quickly insists, Yuri is just a child who can't make sound decisions. Yuri isn't having it and immediately fires back, asking if the man is seriously questioning his judgment. He drives the point home that his mana method isn't something you can just delete or reboot. Calcio immediately has his back, stating that Yuri isn't the kind of person to back down, and then asks the council if their master plan is to literally tear the boy's core from his body. The Duke's crony is seething, but Calcio remains completely unfazed, highlighting how ridiculous this whole argument has become. You can tell little Yuri is quickly becoming a Calcio fanboy at this moment, flashing him a look of pure gratitude for intervening. Calcio then lays it all on the table, stating that they are actively jeopardizing the prince's future by squandering time on these meaningless debates. It's almost as if the royal capital can afford the luxury of sitting around and spewing nonsense. That was the last straw for Duke Gennard. Visibly furious after getting verbally slammed, he finally snaps and unloads on Calcio, accusing the border forces of bleeding the kingdom's treasury dry while conveniently keeping their mouths shut. That strikes a chord. Calcio's gaze turns razor sharp, cutting right through him, as he asks if things only get loud once 100 men have to die. He then drops a heavy dose of reality about life on the front lines, revealing that reports of soldiers' deaths come in every single day. It's almost unbelievable that no one in this room has spared even a single minute to hear about them. He reveals that on the very day he departed the border, news arrived that 4 soldiers had been killed. One of them was a close friend he had just shared breakfast with that morning. He admits in a low voice that he personally draped the burial shroud just before he left for this meeting. With that bombshell, he makes one thing crystal clear: orcs do not rest. They are a species engineered for war and carnage. His chilling words trigger a flashback for Yuri, reminding him of the old feud between Briol and the Klein Duchy. All that infighting created the perfect opening for the orcs to flood across the border and wreak absolute havoc. Yuri questions if the situation has changed recently, and Calcio confirms that things have become far more alarming than usual. Yuri then asks if Klein soldiers were stationed at the border, but Calcio revealed their border patrol had abruptly retreated without warning. That's how Yuri discovers the nearby villages were burned to the ground, their people either dragged off as slaves or massacred on the spot. It has him wondering if a civil war is brewing, or if Duke Gennard's third son royally screwed something up. The whole council listens to this grim exchange in stunned silence, shocked the prince is even holding it together. Not wasting another second, Prince Yuri declares the assembly over and rises to leave. Duke Gennard attempts to protest, but Yuri shuts him down with an icy stare, throwing some major shade at the so-called noble for wasting time on such petty issues, like mana methods. He tells them bluntly they should be channeling that energy into solving real problems, like fortifying their defenses against both the Duchy of Klein and the orc hordes. And with that, the kid lands a critical hit on the pride of every single greedy parasite in the chamber, telling them to stop fixating on a teenager and finally start doing their jobs. Later, the story of the whole explosive encounter with the third prince makes its way to Count Sidor, as Calcio recounts what went down in the Elders' Council. He explains to Seymour that the prince seems like a completely transformed person. Seymour then asks for Calcio's gut feeling, and Calcio puts it simply: the look in the prince's eyes was anything but weak. Taking that assessment to heart, Seymour gives Calcio a new mission: keep a very close eye on the third prince, and maybe even dig a little into his background. With that, Sidor terminates the call through the communication crystal, saying they'll connect again soon. After the line goes dead, Calcio is left standing alone, lost in thought about how soldiers are dying on the frontiers, while the capital remains so blissfully unaware. In that very moment, he catches sight of the third prince outside. Hernando, at Yuri's command, has snuck him out of the palace, and the two of them look like a couple of kids on the run. Yuri teases him, asking if he made a habit of running away from home 3 times a day. Hernando just chuckles and admits he was quite the troublemaker. Yuri is confused why this clumsy guy is so incredibly hyped when he has the freedom to wander around whenever he pleases, but Hernando is addicted to the thrill of defiance, especially when it involves a forbidden act like sneaking a prince out of the palace. He asks about their master plan, but Yuri just shrugs, saying there's no crazy scheme in the works as long as he's around. But Hernando keeps grilling him, demanding the real story. And what Yuri drops is a bombshell. He's plotting a raid on the capital's most notorious underground casino. Hernando is absolutely shook. He seriously thought Yuri was done pulling these kinds of wild stunts. Next thing you know, the kid is pleading for the casino's location, swearing it's all to protect Brielle. The second he hears her name, something inside Hernando just clicks. His entire demeanor flips. A manic grin spreads across his face as he eagerly offers to be their guide, totally hyped to help burn that place to the ground. In the life Yuri remembers, certain names echoed through the streets of Briole with legendary status. One of them belonged to the undisputed king of the criminal underworld, a man who was also the city's most feared loan shark, alongside a corporate giant who constructed the largest trading empire on the continent. Then, a wave of terror gripped Briole's streets after a phantom assassin decapitated a major crime lord. That crime lord's name was Gorio. And now, impossibly, he's standing right in front of Yuri, very much alive and reigning as the underworld's #1 loan shark. Gorio claims it's a privilege to welcome such distinguished guests to his establishment, and it hits Yuri immediately. Gorio already knows who they are. He's clocked them as the third prince and the royal mage. That explains the personal welcome, but Yuri cuts right to the chase, letting him know this isn't a social call. Gorio picks up on the vibe change instantly, seamlessly slipping into his business persona. Hernando, on the other hand, looks like he's just been stabbed in the back. The guy was here for high-stakes poker and adrenaline, not some secret political negotiation. One ice-cold glare from Yuri is all it takes to silence him. Gorio cuts in, asking if the prince needs a loan, but Yuri frames it differently, proposing what sounds more like an investment opportunity. Gorio isn't buying it for a second. He can tell this kid is secretly building a private war chest, and the fact that he came to a shark like him instead of a legitimate bank. Now that makes the situation infinitely more compelling. Gorio can see it now. The third prince is playing a much bigger game, with a fire of raw ambition burning in his eyes. Yuri, however, has no intention of spilling the details. He shuts the line of questioning down flat, reminding Goryo that his job description doesn't include being nosy. Goryo immediately pivots, offering a swift apology. Leaning forward, Yuri coolly reminds him who holds the power in this negotiation. He's the client, after all. But Goryo still needs to know what the cash is for. Yuri reveals his target. He plans to corner the market on Mugranza, an exotic spice found only in the Clane Mountains. His gamble is that the supply is about to be choked off while demand skyrockets. Meanwhile, Hernando's head is spinning. This whole situation is escalating way too quickly. Goryo is aware that Mugranza is a crucial ingredient for crafting luxury perfumes, but he's still skeptical about its investment potential. Yuri, however, radiates absolute confidence that the hype is about to explode. Hernando chimes in, remembering the civil war simmering in the Klein Principality and the rampant orc tribes plaguing the area, which makes him seriously doubt this whole spice price boom theory. A different thought begins to form in his mind. Maybe the kid's real play is to monopolize a niche local product before it goes mainstream. Yet, there's an undeniable certainty in Yuri's posture that proves this isn't some wild guess. Even Goryo starts to realize that Yuri Bryle is no clueless aristocrat cosplaying as a businessman. This kid is a predator, calculated, dangerously sharp, and holding a handful of secrets. Then Yuri starts breaking down the financials, his royal demeanor vanishing, replaced by the cold precision of a seasoned investor. Goryo silently weighs every word, before finally sliding the contract across the table. A triumphant smile flashes across Yuri's face. He just secured his victory. Hernando, on the other hand, is still reeling, unable to process how this kid had the nerve to take out such a massive loan, especially from a shark like Goryo. He's still muttering under his breath, complaining that he was completely left in the dark, and is totally salty that they haven't hit a single card table. But Yuri knew if he'd told Hernando the plan, the mage would have marched him straight back to the palace, and ratted him out to the king. So, he kept it on the down low. With the funding secured, his next stop is the Merchants Guild, and that Mugranza deal? The profit is practically a sure thing. You see, Yuri knows something no one else does. He knows that when the impending civil war finally erupts, its first victim will be the region's chief alchemist, the one and only person who knows the secret to processing Mugranza, a man who is also a close confidant of Duke Klein. And until a new expert can be found, Yuri will have a complete monopoly, allowing him to name his own price. But he's also smart enough to know this operation can't be trusted to just any random person. This is what leads them to a dilapidated, sketchy-looking building in the slums. Hernando is throwing some serious side-eye at the kid for even setting foot in a dump like this. Yuri pounds on the door, shouting for someone named Irene Wood, as Hernando continues to whine that the official guild was the obvious and much safer choice. A confused-looking Irene emerges, asking what all the commotion is about. Yuri doesn't hesitate. He introduces himself on the spot and offers her a position. Meanwhile, our favorite mage is having an absolute meltdown over the fact that the third prince would lower himself to recruit someone from this hovel. He starts tearing into Yuri's decision-making, completely bewildered, that he'd gamble the future of the Mugranza trade on some tiny, back-alley operation. But a sly, knowing grin spreads across Yuri's face. He knows that right now, this place just looks like a failing business, run by a nobody. But he is holding an ace he hasn't revealed yet, because Irene Wood is destined to become the most legendary merchant this continent has ever seen. While a man like Goryo resorts to every dirty trick in the book, when the chips are down, Irene's greatest asset is her unbreakable integrity. And with that thought, a chilling smirk plays on little Yuri's lips. In his first life, the guy peaked at being a legendary merchant, but this time around, Yuri is dead set on forging him into a genuine myth. Hernando, whose brain is still buffering, finally asks if Yuri's done with all his side quests. With a casual shrug, Yuri says he has one final stop, forcing Hernando to scramble to keep up. While Yuri's already playing 5D chess, the underworld's top loan shark and the great merchant are already locked into his grand design. Now, there's just one more piece needed to complete the legendary set. The pair find themselves on a grim street where beggars are literally scrapping over crumbs. Yuri scans the area, knowing she has to be here, and his eyes lock onto a group of kids. Stepping forward as Yuri Briole, the third prince, he addresses the woman leading them, the very same one who took out Goryo in his previous timeline. This is Asana, the assassin of legend. Obviously, the first thing running through the future killer's mind was why royalty would ever be caught dead in the slums. Yuri immediately throws up his hands, assuring her, he's here on good terms. There's no need to be sketched out. He's here because he figured he could help out those in need. He glances back at Hernando and gives the signal for the item they brought along. The mage clutches the bag, not wanting to part with it, but ultimately caves and hands over the sack, bulging with a fortune in coins. The prince's eyes then flick over to a little girl cowering behind Asana, clearly terrified by these fancy strangers. Yuri knew instantly. This kid was the whole reason Asana took a crippling loan from Goryo. In his past life, she had to make that desperate deal to get the girl treatment for a life-threatening illness. And just like everyone else who borrowed from that soulless loan shark, Asana's life immediately spiraled into a nightmare. That dark road is what ultimately forged her into an assassin. She shot to infamy in the criminal underworld, becoming one of the deadliest killers for hire. But Yuri's little field trip to the slums is all about rewriting that tragic backstory. Without a long explanation, he pushes the bag of coins into her hands and tells her to take the little girl to the temple to get healed. When she asks what he wants for this insane amount of money, his answer is short and sweet. Flashing a brilliant smile, the only thing he asks for is that she remembers his name, Yuri Briole, the third prince of the kingdom. With that, they dip, leaving the depressing side of town behind. As they walk away from that bleak neighborhood, Hernando is still trying to figure out why the prince just dropped a fortune on some random person. But for Yuri, it was a priceless investment in the future. In one single night, he forged invaluable alliances with 3 people who will become absolute legends in just a few years. He now holds all the key players in the palm of his hand. Besides those 3, there's just one more person he needs to lock down. He turns to Hernando and hits him with a simple question. He asks the slacker mage what exactly he saw in the founding king's tomb. With a sheepish grin, Hernando admits that all he did in that vision world was gamble. Yuri was 100% not expecting that answer. The mage explains he was at the Empire's Barthlegas casino, playing a game with his own life as the ante. It's a shocking confession, but for a degenerate gambler like him, a casino really is a battlefield. Visions or not, Yuri's main concern is that Hernando keeps everything that happened tonight on the down low. That means not even a whisper to the king. But just as the third prince predicted, the court mage is summoned to the throne room, ordered to report on the prince's activities, even though they tried to slip out without anyone noticing. The king had heard they went out last night. Hernando doesn't even try to deny it, so the king presses for the juicy details. The mage spins a tale of how Yuri practically dragged him out of the palace in the dead of night. He confesses, truthfully, that they marched straight to the biggest casino in the capital. Images of their sketchy deal, with that infamous loan shark, flash through his mind. Of course, King Fiore immediately assumes they went there to blow a bunch of money at the tables. With the most earnest smile he can fake, the mage lies straight through his teeth and confirms that they did, in fact, spend some money. The king doesn't even look surprised. To really sell it, Hernando adds that he lost every coin he'd loaned the young prince playing card games, which, he claims, he totally sucks at. When asked for more details about their night, the truly bizarre sequence of events plays out in his head. They took money from an underworld boss and funneled it into a failing old merchant guild. Then they gave the rest to some random orphan in the slums. Naturally, Hernando leaves all that out. In his version, they just cruised around to see how the common folk were doing. The prince was simply curious about the lives of his subjects. They were back before sunrise. That was it. End of story. King Fiore absorbed the report, his expression a perfect stone mask. He sensed the court mage was holding something back, but he chose not to press the issue. Abruptly shifting topics, a grin stretched across his face as he asked Hernando if he planned on hitting up the royal ball. The court mage shot back a confident yes. This threw the king for a loop. This guy was the absolute last person you'd expect to see at a formal party. Then again, people can be full of surprises. Besides, it had been a hot minute since the king himself had unleashed his moves on the dance floor. Meanwhile, Yuri is back on the training grounds, gearing up for his daily beatdown from the sword demon. And like clockwork, he sprawled out on his back after another brutal session. As he was catching his breath, he noticed a little buzz of activity nearby. He started ribbing Bernard about being a low-key celebrity among the castle ladies, as the maids kept stealing glances at the stoic trainer. As they blushed and whispered, Yuri kept pushing his unmovable teacher, urging him to go to the ball and give the fans what they want. Bernard flatly rejected the idea, stating he had zero interest in that scene. That inherited sword technique, however, was living rent-free in his mind. Ever since he started messing with it, he had to admit that, unfortunately, the third prince had been 100% right. No matter how intensely he analyzed the movements, the technique felt hollow and incomplete, like he was only practicing half of the real thing. For Yuri, however, the soul severance technique is pure instinct. He just moves, flowing with it, no logic, no rules. There's literally nothing else like it. A mana method and a sword style perfectly fused into one? It's unheard of. But Bernard refuses to throw in the towel. Maybe, just maybe, watching the third prince in a live combat situation would give him the breakthrough he needs. When it came to their regular training, he was genuinely impressed with Yuri's insane progress, both in his blade work and his mana manipulation. To be real, the kid's development was mind-blowing. But the truth is, this wasn't really progress in the traditional sense. The prince was actually in the process of erasing the Brielle method he had perfected in his past life. With a look of genuine concern, the sword demon warned the kid to take it easy. He was worried Yuri's power was skyrocketing way faster than his body could handle. The kid had already accomplished so much for his age, but if he keeps redlining it like this, something is gonna give. Flashing a confident grin, Yuri promised the old sword nerd that he knew how to keep things balanced. After all, nobody knew his body better than him. In fact, he was down for another round right then and there. To kick things up a notch, he tossed aside the wooden sword and drew the legendary ancestor's blade. With a cocky smirk, he challenged Bernard to draw his own weapon. The sword demon obliged, his own blade sliding from its sheath with elegant grace. To add a real thrill to the fight, Yuri proposed a little wager. If he manages to land just one solid hit, Bernard has to attend the upcoming ball. Naturally, the sword nerd shot down such a wild bet. Plus, he was pretty damn sure he was going to win this fight anyway. Beyond that, he had zero confidence that Yuri, who had absolutely no credibility, would actually make good on any bet he lost. Annoyed that his master was basically writing him off, the third prince flooded his blade with crackling mana. He shot forward like a cannonball, hunting for any sliver of an opening. Yuri's blade crashed against Bernard's, master and student trading blows with massive grins on their faces. Spoiler alert, the third prince lost. Hard. He still has a long, long way to go. A few days later, the thunder of galloping hooves echoed from every corner of the kingdom, all converging on the castle. The night of the ball had finally arrived. In one of the most lavish carriages, a tall, blond man encased in brilliant armor stared intently through the window. The Empire's second prince, Georg Ivanov Granzan, was making his grand entrance. Seated directly across from him was none other than the little princess, Yekaterina Ivanov Granzan. It felt like an eternity since she had last left the Empire. Tonight, there was one person she was dying to meet. A couple of hours before the main event, the third prince is getting decked out. He's finally ditched his usual plain and practical clothes for an outfit that screams royalty. In reality, he wanted nothing more than to rip off this stuffy getup. All the frills and decorations were way too flashy for him. Ina reminded him that he used to love this kind of over-the-top style. After fastening the last button and adjusting his collar, Ina turned to leave. Before she could exit, the third prince asked her for a dance, claiming he needed to get some practice in and had no one else to team up with. Ina stammered, looking completely thrown by the young master's sudden proposition. She immediately suspected he was plotting to step on her feet or trip her or something. But then, he gently took her by the hand. He pulled Ina closer, promising he wouldn't pull any stunts, no games. For tonight, they were simply dance partners, moving to their own private melody. He led, and she followed. Ina felt her heart do a little flip, and she found herself completely at a loss for words. As the dashing young master guided her with surprising care, her anxieties began to melt away. Ina bragged that she was a pretty decent dancer herself. In return, he playfully shot back, asking who exactly she'd been practicing with. Ina puffed her chest out, saying she was pretty popular, but she'd never actually danced with someone this short before. No problem though, that height gap isn't going to be an issue for long. For a few breathtaking moments, the two were lost in the dance. Ina might have stepped on his foot once or twice, but inside the magnificent ballroom, a wave of enchanting music washed over everything. The dance floor was a sea of nobles, each pair gliding across the marble with their most practiced, elegant moves. Perched in the highest booth, King Fiore sat on his throne, swirling his wine and observing the grand affair below. Over by the feast table, which was absolutely stacked with food, the three princes were kicking back, laughing, and deep in conversation. But Yuri wasn't relaxing. His eyes were methodically sweeping the room, and that's when he spotted him. Count Seymour was in the building. The guy just radiated a different energy from the other knights. And surprise, surprise, he didn't send his usual stand-in, Baron Rancha, tonight. Yuri's attention darted to his eldest brother's glasses. He leaned in and asked the crown prince if his vision was getting even fuzzier, but his big bro just brushed it off, assuring him it was nothing to lose sleep over. Just then, a powerful blast from the trumpets cut through the noise. This was the signal for a major entrance. The crowd of nobles parted like the Red Sea as the second prince of the empire strode in with his entire crew. Prince Georg marched directly to the king to offer his greetings. Fiore clasped the blonde prince's hand and gave him a polite thank you for making the journey. They traded a few more pleasantries, and then Georg finally gestured to his little sister, introducing her to everyone. The moment Yekaterina came into focus, a black hole opened up in Yuri's stomach. In stark contrast to his thunderous expression, the little princess was the picture of politeness, her greetings flawless and graceful. Who could possibly imagine that this angelic-looking girl would be the spark that burned his kingdom to the ground? Even now, Yuri can still recall their sweet, shared memories. But of course, he also remembers the inevitable, gut-wrenching finale. The image of her written apology, delivered by a carrier pigeon, still crashes into his nightmares. In this life, he swore to himself that he would never build a connection, not even the slightest interaction, with this girl. He could not afford to make the same devastating mistake, never again. His intense, silent brooding from the sidelines had already snagged the princess's attention. While the other princes of the kingdom showered her with compliments and formalities, she just offered them quick, polite smiles in return. The night dragged on. Wherever the princess wandered, Yuri made damn sure to keep a wide, safe distance. He glanced at the dance floor and saw his eldest brother gliding along with some noblewoman. Classic Cedric. He was as respectful and smooth as always. Yuri could see all the makings of a great and kind ruler in his brother. Compared to a guy like that, he felt like an absolute Neanderthal. He couldn't even successfully avoid the Empire's princess for one single night. Thank God his second brother was always there, glued to the young lady's side. Even though Yuri is shouldering the weight of a future that hasn't even happened, the feelings and the memories are still painfully real. Thankfully, Ina was there to pull him out of his funk with her incredible cookies and a warm smile. He asked if serving guests at such a massive event was draining. She just laughed and said this was a cakewalk compared to looking after a certain someone. After he devoured every last cookie from her tray, Yuri's dark mood started to lift. He leaned back against a table, just praying this night of high society drama would end soon. His thoughts were cut short by the Empire's second prince, approaching him with a searching, intense gaze. In his previous life, Gorgy Vranagrancian became a literal legend. He was the one commanding the armies on the battlefield instead of the king. Yuri's etiquette training snapped into place on pure instinct. He executed a perfect bow and formally introduced himself as the third prince of the kingdom, to the very man who would one day leave it in ruins. It took every fiber of his being to remain composed and choke down the murderous rage rising in his throat. But unfortunately for Yuri, it looked like Georg had found something especially interesting about him. With a predatory smile, the second prince suddenly unleashed a suffocating, oppressive aura that coiled around Yuri's neck. It felt like a dozen invisible blades were dancing against his skin, teasing his vital points. The second prince asked with a grim tone if he had just turned 13 this year. Without even waiting for a reply, Georg turned and walked away, having gathered enough information to know that Fior's third son was an exceptionally talented kid. Yuri's fist clenched in pure frustration. That guy just openly sized him up and threatened him with that invasive pressure test. He felt just how monstrously strong Georg was, and the man wasn't even in his prime yet. Those monsters from the Empire really are a different breed of insane. All of a sudden, the sound of wine glasses shattering on the floor made everyone's head turn. Ina had accidentally spilled red wine all over Georg's cape, a massive act of disrespect against the symbol of the entire empire. But instead of looking pissed, the second prince just looked devious. Yuri saw the entire disaster unfold, and his blood ran cold. Without a single moment of hesitation, Georg's hand moved, drawing his sword from its sheath. He lightly pressed the ice-cold blade against Ina's throat, like an executioner hungry for a kill. He starts spouting some ancient crown law, claiming a mistake this big means one thing: death. And Yuri's the only one who clocked it. This absolute psycho intentionally tricked Ina. For a simple slip-up, Prince Georg demands her head, all in the name of his twisted justice. But just as things escalate, the king intervenes, shutting Prince Georg down for ruining the party. King Fiori's voice booms across the hall. If he's so thirsty for blood, he should go spill it on his own turf. Georg can feel the weight of the king's command, forcing him to sheath his blade. He bows, offering a fake-ass apology. He goes on about the mutual respect between their kingdoms, but it's all a setup. Then, he pulls a masterclass redirection. He drops a name, Gatensha, an imperial knight Fiori personally executed on Empire soil. Back then, the emperor was chill about it. He respected the king's honor and didn't ask for payback. And Prince Georg is now using that incident as leverage, framing the situation as the exact same thing. Slicing off this maid's head, he argues, is about protecting the peace and honor of both nations. This is a power move, a low-key challenge to Fior's authority. With just one smooth-brained argument, Georg has the king completely boxed in. If the king stops this execution, it'll look like he's disrespecting their agreement, basically declaring war on the empire over a single maid. Yuri's mind races, weighing the options. Necessities and conditions, ideals versus reality, logic versus power are all tenets that get completely steamrolled by the core philosophy of Bryol. A person from Bryol must never abandon honor. It's a code you live and die by. That oath is everything. And just as Prince Georg raises his sword, ready to send Ina's head flying, Yuri's voice cuts through the silence. He strolls into the center of the room and declares, the maid is his. He states that since she works for him, her screw-up is his screw-up, prince to prince. He challenges Georg to rethink the whole execution thing. But deep down, Yuri feels like this is just karma for his past life catching up to him. For the crimes of his past, the universe dealt him a garbage hand, and now he's forced to play it. It's not like he ever had a choice. So, instead of a public execution right here, right now, he offers an alternative, a trial by combat. Hearing this kid's serious proposal, the second prince of the empire just bursts out laughing. He's totally amused, but now, he's definitely going to remember the name Yuri. As the two princes face off, the air crackles with tension as every noble in the room holds their breath. Georg turns to the king, announcing his intention to accept this absolutely insane offer. The king, seeing no other way out, reluctantly agrees, even though he knows he's basically feeding his son to a pack of wolves. But then, Prince Georg pulls another move to save face. He claims their power levels are too different for a direct fight, so he'll use a proxy for the duel. He announces he'll choose the youngest knight from the Imperial Guard, just to give the third prince a fighting chance. With the drama settled, Georg decides he's had enough of this party, and dips. The second that lunatic is gone, Yuri sprints over to Ina's side to check on her. She's still trembling, completely traumatized after being literal seconds away from losing her life, in the most horrific way possible. Yuri offers her a hand, but the poor girl is too weak to even stand. She's crushed by the guilt of knowing her master is now in deep trouble because of her. In the end, the other maids have to help carry her out. As Yuri turns to leave, he bumps right into the Empire's princess. Yekaterina's usual smile is completely gone, replaced by a dead serious look. Yuri just closes his eyes, shoving aside any pointless thoughts, and walks straight past her without a single word. From a distance, Hernando has been watching this whole train wreck unfold, wineglass in hand. Later, on the way back to his quarters, Yuri's oldest brother is waiting for him in the hall. The Crown Prince's usual chill vibe is gone, replaced with pure worry, as he asks his little brother, what the hell is going to happen now? Yuri just tells him straight up he couldn't just stand there and watch that monster butcher Ina like an animal. The Crown Prince just sighs, ruffling Yuri's hair with genuine affection. It's been a hot minute since he's felt his brother's real concern for him. Before letting him go, Cedric asks his little bro if he needs any backup for this absolute mess he's gotten into. Sure, Prince Georg tried to play it off like he was being generous by picking a proxy close to Yuri's level, but Cedric isn't buying it for a second. He knows that if Yuri fights a knight supposedly at his skill level, it's the perfect setup for a tragic accident to happen during the duel. Cedric offers to step in, to handle this whole situation his way. However, Yuri refuses. He started this fire, and he's going to be the one to put it out. Seeing that unwavering confidence radiating from his little brother, Cedric backs off, deciding to put his faith in him. Meanwhile, the party is completely wrecked. With the second prince storming out, it's now Cedric's job to go fix the awkward, heavy vibe in the ballroom. Man, Yuri really admires his big bro. He's positive that if their kingdom hadn't been destroyed in his past life, Cedric would have been an amazing king. This time around, he's determined to see what kind of kingdom his brother would build. For Brielle to endure under Cedric's reign, the boy has no choice but to battle through and forge a future with his own hands. It took Georg virtually no time to nominate the youngest knight in his entire order, and today, some red-headed prodigy cooked up by the Empire has stepped onto the stage to face the third prince, with everyone watching from their seats. Judging by that thrilled grin on his face, Hernando didn't seem the least bit concerned about this showdown. As for Captain Sand, he's seen his fair share of geniuses, and from the knight's refined movements, he can tell the guy's energy is flawlessly stable. The knight is clearly a master of the blade as well. This dude is the pinnacle of the Empire's military machine. But while Captain Sand is stressing hardcore over Yuri's safety, the court mage beside him is just kicking back with a smile and a quiet chuckle. Up on the stage, the third prince was just casually stretching his arms and yawning, as if this fight was the biggest chore in the world. In Hernando's professional opinion, there was absolutely nothing to be worried about. In this world, the rank of Grand Wizard is a peak that's practically unreachable. Among all the titles granted to mages, this one is exclusively for those who have mastered what is known as origin magic. And among those all-powerful origin spells lies the ultimate ability to peek into the world's destiny, the all-seeing, fate-revealing magic. In this entire world, only a single mage has ever managed to learn that overpowered skill, and his name is Hernando. He remembers the time he went up against the third prince. It was back when they were both in their degenerate gambling phase. That was the very first time he had ever lost money since awakening his origin magic. At first, he tried to write it off as a simple coincidence. Maybe his luck was just bad that day, but that was impossible. His fate-revealing magic let him read an opponent's hand and the flow of fortune with a single glance, but when it came to that brat, he couldn't see a single thing about his future. When he pushed his power to its limit, all he saw was the illusion of a mountain made of swords piercing through the veil. He could just make out a boy with black hair and an arrogant fire in his eyes. It was, without a doubt, the third prince. Hernando witnessed the young man tear through hordes of enemies, Even as his own body was bloodied and battered, he swung his sword without yielding for a single second. The strange vision ended with the young knight finally collapsing in absolute despair. Back then, Hernando just dismissed the vision as a weird glitch in his ability, a fluke, if you will. From that moment on, he became conscious of an anomaly that defied the universal order. And Hernando was right there beside the prince the whole time. He observed the kid's unpredictable actions and his radical changes, convinced that his fate-revealing magic could eventually shatter that seemingly impenetrable wall. But now, it all makes perfect sense. He is certain that Prince Yuri is a man who walks without a destiny. And right now, that very kid, with no foreseeable future, is about to put his skills on display for everyone in the arena. His opponent has been warming up, swinging his sword on the other side of the stage, which is driving the impatient third prince absolutely insane. Second Prince Jorg called out to the fighters to see if they were ready, and both combatants gave the signal to begin. Under the king's intense, watchful eye, the trial by combat officially began. In the opening seconds, both the prince and the knight kept their distance, cautiously watching for the slightest twitch or sudden move. The instant the signal was given, Yuri launched himself forward at a terrifying speed, shocking the Imperial Knight. The knight had a flash forward of himself being caught by that first strike so badly that a quarter of his torso was completely annihilated. But like a true battle-hardened warrior, the knight pushed through the initial shock and snapped his sword up to defend. They became a blur, trading blows in mere milliseconds while darting all over the stage. Yuri's blade was a fluid extension of his will, attacking and defending, switching between lethal offense and an unbreakable guard. As the fight intensifies, he finds it harder and harder to suppress the smile creeping onto his face. And now, the opponent who was trying to catch him off guard is sporting a long, fresh cut on his cheek. In the crowd, King Fiore turned to his court mage. With all the concern of a worried father, he asked Hernando what he foresaw as the outcome of this deadly dance of blades. But in all honesty, the all-seeing mage couldn't predict the end result in the slightest, and instead of feeling worried, he was absolutely thrilled. The king recalled that when the young mage first arrived in Brielle, he claimed that he was led there by heaven's own guidance. When the king asked if his time to depart had finally come, Hernando gave a decisive and simple answer: no. Fiore breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad such a valuable powerhouse was staying by his side. Hernando gave a humble reply, to which the king warned that being excessively modest could attract misfortune. Guiding the king's attention back to the fight, he then asked the strongest swordsman in the world for his expert opinion on who the superior fighter was between the two warriors on the stage. Without a shred of doubt, King Fiore gave the title to the Empire's prodigious young knight. Logically speaking, and based on all available evidence, the king's assessment was absolutely correct. It's finally starting to make sense to Hernando why the heavens guided him to this specific kingdom. The universe was pushing him into the orbit of a single man who could completely upend the world's destiny. His first guess was that he was being led to the realm's greatest swordsman, the king himself. But honestly, after years of absolute peace, he was ready to call it a day. Just pack his bags and bounce. Except now, this fascinating young man is evolving into something truly extraordinary, and there's no way Hernando is leaving before he sees how this plays out. The moment the young knight charged him head-on, Yuri unleashed his mana, enveloping his ancestral blade in a terrifying aura. He was done playing games, done testing the waters. It was time to drop the pretense and end this ridiculous farce. The knight felt it instantly, a terrifying surge in the prince's speed. The blade moved like liquid steel, a silver glint dancing around him before closing in for the kill, right at his throat. As the searing heat of the mana scorched his skin and the chilling metal crept closer, the young knight squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable end. But the people who were truly shook were the royals watching from the imperial deck. From his vantage point, Fiore could track every single move in that lightning-fast assault, down to the smallest detail. Even Captain Sand was just staring, jaw on the floor, at the insane turnaround on the stage. As for Hernando, a wry smile spread across his face at the kid's final decision. He had actually twisted his sword at the last possible microsecond, mere inches from a clean decapitation. He deliberately halted his attack the very moment the young knight finally choked out his surrender. The viewing decks erupted in thunderous cheers for the prince. For years, Hernando had wandered the continent, following cosmic signs. Who would have ever guessed he'd find someone who could defy the very light that guided him? Life became death, and death was reborn as life. The humble mage's entire destiny had been rewritten, and so had the boy's. Every move he makes is a middle finger to the cosmos. Yuri Brielle is the only known being unbound by the chains of a predetermined fate, and Hernando cannot wait to see what kind of chaos this kid is about to unleash on the world. The thought of how this anomaly will reshape global destiny sends a thrilling chill down the mage's spine, and just like that, 5 years of calm settled over the land of Briolles. Today, a brand new maid is sprinting through the castle corridors, a bundle of pure anxiety. It's her first day, and she's already lost, completely mixing up her assigned wing. Right as she was praying, she could slip into place unnoticed. A sharp voice froze her in her tracks. The voice was deep, his eyes were dark, and his jet black hair was the symbol of Briol's unwavering loyalty. The man began grilling her, his tone full of suspicion as she wandered the deserted halls. The rookie struggled to keep her cool, trying to recall what her trainers had taught her. The man just kept staring her down. His face wasn't a stone mask, so he couldn't be the king. And the crown prince, well, he was known for greeting everyone with a disarming smile. This guy, though, he had sinister eyes and a slouched, crooked posture. He had to be one of the other princes. Terrified of messing up with a royal on her literal first day, the newbie tried to excuse herself and escape, but the man just roared at her, enraged that she would dare ignore his royal presence. He demanded to know if the maids had some secret handbook, specifically telling them to avoid him at all costs. His patience worn thin, the prince decided it was time to school the new girl on proper etiquette, and not gently. But before things could escalate, a chill voice called out, telling his brother to quit being a creep. Back when the newbie was in training, everyone warned her to keep an eye out for one other person in this massive fortress. They said if she ever saw a ridiculously handsome man with a confident swagger and a sword strapped to his hip, she was to greet the third prince with the highest level of respect. After physically dragging his brother away from the terrified maid, Yuri took a walk through the courtyard, a bag of snacks already in his hand. As a thank you for saving her, the maid had gratefully given him a bag packed with rich sweets. They were actually pretty amazing. After wiping his mouth clean, Yuri centered himself. He'd finally reached the unarmed realm, a state where the strain on his body is reduced, whether he's holding a sword or not. Hitting that level after years of grinding was a massive win. It had been half a decade since Lauren's undead blade ended his first life, and sent him spiraling back to his scrawny 13-year-old body. Now, at 18, he knew the quiet days were numbered. Speaking of which, the old geezers in charge of the kingdom's future were probably in a meeting right now, running their mouths off. Yuri made his way to the conference room. He knocked, then shouted for them to open up, but got nothing but silence. Inside, he could hear the muffled sounds of a heated argument. The guard posted at the entrance suggested the third prince should probably try knocking again, a little louder this time, so someone might actually hear him. But Yuri was done being ignored. He channeled his enhanced mana straight into his fist and simply obliterated the door. The high-ranking nobles of the kingdom looked up, completely stunned, and confused by the third prince's sudden appearance. "Sorry for busting in," he said casually. "I was knocking for like a full minute, but it seems like nobody heard me." With a shrug, he added, "So, I used a little more force the second time." Yuri then turned to his father, seated at the head of the table, and demanded a seat at the table. Once he was settled, the heated debate over the final, massive agenda item raged on. A young count reignited the argument, insisting they had 0 troops to spare for any allies beyond their own borders. If the aristocracy was just going to ghost the empire's desperate plea for help, then they damn well better be prepared to handle the fallout themselves. But Yuri wasn't just listening to the words. He was reading the room, seeing exactly why everyone was so dug in on their positions. Everyone was ruthlessly calculating their potential gains and losses. It was all just a high-stakes game of numbers. And if his memory served him right, this so-called coalition of allied forces and the absolute slaughter it was about to walk into were kicking off any day now. The Empire had put out a call to every neighboring territory. The mission? To cobble together a joint military force. They were begging for soldiers from every nation, hoping to build an army, massive enough to launch a huge orc raid deep into the east. The only problem? Yuri knew this entire operation was doomed to be a spectacular failure. Enraged, the orcs would tear through the human army like paper, putting catastrophic pressure on all the border nations. But here was the truly messed up part. The orcs would mysteriously bypass the Empire entirely. That's when it would click for everyone that the letter, the failed raid, and the entire bloody aftermath had been a perfectly engineered catastrophe from the very beginning. In that timeline, Brielle lost some of its greatest knights and heroes, a legend named Sir Leon Flandre among them. But with Yuri in the room where it all goes down, he refuses to let history repeat itself. The council was deadlocked on whether to commit their soldiers to this suicide mission. And just before the whining and complaining about protecting their precious numbers could spiral out of control, Yuri cut through the noise and volunteered to deploy to the front lines, personally. He would join the Allied forces to prove their kingdom's commitment to the world. As for these posturing old men, he only asked them to finally act like nobles and stop dragging the Brielle name through the mud. Hearing his son speak with such conviction and authority pulled a faint smirk onto the king's face. He was genuinely impressed. His boy had just delivered a solution that flawlessly checked every single political box. Later on, Yuri made his way to his sanctuary, the training grounds, for a sparring session with Bernard, one of his brothers in arms. But then, his actual brother, the obnoxious one, stormed into the arena, demanding to know if the rumors were true, that his little bro was actually shipping out to the front. The arrogant, clueless brute just couldn't process why Yuri would ever abandon his safety, when he could live a pampered, untouchable life inside the castle walls. Yuri shot back that what he was doing is the very definition of a royal's duty. With a heavy sigh, the second prince admitted he finally saw what his little brother was all about. A new light flickered in his eyes, a fresh respect for the stakes, and he swore he would defend the palace while Yuri was gone. Then the weirdo sprinted off with his goofy-looking run. At this rate, Yuri would just be relieved if that idiot managed not to burn their home down, let alone protect it. Speaking of leaving, the third prince turned to his oldest friend and mentor, Bernard, and asked him straight up if he was worried. The legendary sword demon figured that as long as the kid didn't do anything too insane out there, he'd come back in one piece. For a guy as critical as Bernard, that was practically a glowing endorsement. Still, he pressed the prince to stay sharp and never let his guard down. From his days on the battlefield, Bernard knew firsthand how deceptively dangerous orcs could be. Those hulking brutes are way stronger and more vicious than you'd ever expect. He warned Yuri to be on the lookout for a specific type of orc, the ones carrying ragged, tattered flags on their backs. Those things are on a whole other level, like something ripped out of a nightmare. They're orc falls, an especially savage and powerful breed of the species. Yuri just nodded, assuring his mentor that it would all be fine. He had his own ways of handling things, after all. Just then, their conversation was cut short by Ina, who burst into the training hall, gasping for air. She had sprinted all the way over to tell her master that his guest was here, and he'd brought the package he ordered. You see, Yuri has a countermove for this doomed orc raid, a very, very special one. The guest Ina was talking about was already in Yuri's office, casually sipping tea when the third prince walked in. The man, Guillermo, vice president of the Elaine Merchant Guild, shot to his feet and gave a deep, respectful bow. Yuri had expected to meet the guildmaster, Elaine, today, but the madam herself was currently out on a supply run, so her second-in-command had to fill in. It was wild. Even after their guild blew up over the last 5 years, she still insisted on running the most dangerous missions herself. She always said it's what she was built for. But Guillermo didn't show up just to chat. He presented an ornate box, delivering Yuri's special order. The third prince popped it open with a grin, and there it was, the complete 4-piece dagger set known as Elementarian, finally in his hands. Guillermo confessed he had to pull a ton of strings to acquire it, and he couldn't believe the astronomical price tag for what he thought were just some fancy, decorative knives. But these were so much more than decoration. They were powerful artifacts, pulsing with ancient, forgotten magic. The moment Yuri channeled his mana into the blades, Guillermo looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Just to mess with the guy a little more, Yuri slowly guided the glowing tip of a dagger right toward the merchant's face. When the blade was finally pulled away, Guillermo gasped, letting out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. The prince's control over his mana was just unreal. And then, a flicker of movement, a dark shape materializing in the room. It was impossibly fast, completely silent. Yuri caught it in his peripheral vision, but Guillermo, still recovering from the shock, saw absolutely nothing. The sight of a shadowy figure is Yuri's cue to dismiss the businessman. He demands a complete report in a few days' time. He wants a full breakdown of the Empire's raid preparations. The second Guillermo is finally gone, Yuri collapses onto the couch. He summons someone from the darkness. From the void, Asana materializes behind him, decked out in her full assassin gear. First on the agenda, he needs to know if she dealt with their Goryo problem, just as he commanded. Asana confirms she sent the loan shark a message he won't forget. In the dead of night, she paid that scumbag a little visit and made it crystal clear he needed to stay in his lane. Yuri only had to step in because that money-grubbing rat kept sniffing around Elaine's fortune. On her way in, Asana overheard the servants gossiping about her boss joining the Union Army. Her voice tightens with worry as she begs him to be careful. You'd think he was marching into enemy territory all by himself, but that couldn't be further from the truth, because Asana is tagging along for the ride. And when he questions if she can even keep up, her typically deadpan face cracks into a gorgeous smile. Anywhere is an upgrade from the hell she came from. She's sticking by her master's side, even through the chaos of war. A few days later, the march begins. Right before shipping out, Crown Prince Cedric finds his little brother as he's strapping on his slick new black armor, his expression laced with deep concern. All he asks is for Yuri to watch his back out there. But the third prince just scoffs, boasting that on the front lines, he's basically invincible. He's got big plans to elevate Briol's reputation. He fires the concern right back, pointing out how his big brother's vision is getting wrecked from having his face buried in books 24/7. Before parting, Cedric pulls his younger brother into a desperate, tight hug, praying it won't be their last goodbye. Yuri promises he'll be back before he knows it. The war horns blare, a thunderous call that seizes every soldier's attention. High up on a grand platform, King Fiore stands before his nation to begin the departure ceremony. The army's newly appointed commander ascends the carpeted stairs with an aura of pure confidence. The kingdom's third prince, shining in his brand new armor, looks absolutely legendary, speaking not as a king, but as a father. Fiore asks his son if he has butterflies in his stomach, telling the young man to turn around and witness the soldiers he is about to lead. The town square is a sea of Briol warriors, all lined up in perfect formation. Every single one is a precious life that he now has to carry on his shoulders. And realistically, not every man in this square is coming back. But Yuri is dead set on making sure none of them suffer the pathetic deaths he witnessed in his past life. For the final time, the king challenges his son, asking if he's ready for such a monumental burden. But before he can utter a single word, King Fiore vanishes from the podium, and the entire square is suddenly choked by an overwhelmingly hostile aura. Yuri's eyes lock onto the man before him, and he's slammed by a murderous intent so thick and vicious it makes his body tremble. His feet feel like they're bolted to the ground. Every fiber of his being screams that this thing striding towards him is here for his life. It's not a man. It's death personified. As the dark figure lifts its blade, Yuri knows that attempting to dodge will only guarantee a more agonizing end. Luckily, the third prince never, ever skipped training his body and mind for exactly these kinds of high-stakes situations. Channeling the ancestral mana method, he ignites his core to fight off the paralyzing terror. He draws his sword with a steady hand, dropping into a solid defensive stance. But instead of waiting for his opponent to set the pace, he unleashes the soul-severing slash to meet death's charge head-on. Up on the stage, the blades of father and son clash to a dead stop. A satisfied grin spreads across King Fiore's face as he commends his boy for a job well done. That single sword strike was Yuri's official send-off. King Fiore isn't the type to drag out ceremonies. His only order is for his son to return home alive. Like a hardened general, Yuri Briole turns to face the men. He is about to lead through the very depths of hell. He thrusts his sword into the air, and his soldiers erupt, passionately chanting his name. With absolute conviction, he demands that they place all their trust and faith in him. The banners are raised, and blades are unsheathed. The soldiers of Briole begin their march. Miles away, at the border, news of Yuri's deployment travels fast, reaching the ears of a particular individual. Deep within a dungeon, orcs are held captive, not as prisoners, but as research subjects. Count Seymour, the kingdom's legendary first line of defense, is very much looking forward to his meeting with the fated prince. 5 years later, the army has made camp, and the prince is deep in tactical thought. After meticulously scanning the map, he asks Sir Raymond for an ETA on their journey. The knight reports that they must first cut through the border town, and then the city of Gid, before they can finally hit the assembly point in Balshad. But just then, a horribly familiar voice slices through the camp's quiet. It's the voice of the same scumbag who murdered him in his past life. His name is Roland the Margrave's eldest son, Model. He drops to one knee with a perfect, gentlemanly flourish, introducing himself with a level of knightly grace that low-key weirds our prince out. But Yuri plays it cool and gives the guy a nod. The blonde knight then excitedly announces that there's something deeply personal he's been dying to tell him. As Yuri cautiously asks what that could possibly be, Roland's face flushes bright red like he's looking at his ultimate crush. He then just erupts, screaming that he has an insane amount of respect for the prince. Ever since he heard the story a few years back about how the prince defended a mere servant, he's been a total stan of his top-tier knightly conduct. It takes our boy a full second to even process that absolute fire hose of wild compliments. He finally manages a reply, assuring the guy he's also heard good things from his father, and that he hopes they can work well together. This praise practically sends Roland to the moon with joy, and with the fanboy moment concluded, the crew finally moves out. Just before they depart, however, Sir Raymond gives him a heads up not to get offended if the Count of Sidor gives them the cold shoulder. The dude is infamous for his icy demeanor, so you can imagine our prince's shock when he arrives to find a massive welcoming committee waiting for him, positioned right outside the Sidor fortress. Margrave Jaime is there to greet our hero personally. The Margrave explains that his troops are throwing a whole celebration because he's a living legend, the youngest prince to ever command from the field, a commander who actually gets his hands dirty on the front lines. Then, totally switching gears, the Margrave asks if he's ever fought an orc, and our boy proudly puffs up his chest and says he has. Until his brain helpfully reminds him, the only orc he's seen was in a picture book. He makes a smooth recovery though, saying he'd be honored to learn a thing or two from the veteran soldiers of Sidor, the ones who have actually slain orcs. Sir Jaime digs the humble attitude and offers to hook him up with a seriously cool welcome gift. They descend deep beneath the ground into a place that looks suspiciously like a dungeon, where a guard unlocks a heavy door with a very shady grin. Sir Jaime gestures inside, letting our prince know his gift is waiting. Without a hint of fear, our boy strides in confidently, leading his squad from the front. In that same instant, a heavy iron door slams shut right behind them. He immediately demands to know what the old man is playing at, but Sir Jaime just calmly tells him not to sweat it. All at once, a line of torches flares to life, illuminating a path towards something menacing in the darkness. As Yuri's eyes adjust, what he and his men see standing before them is enough to short-circuit their brains. He wonders aloud if it's an orc inside the cage, but Sir Jaime simply calls it Prisoner 69. The man clarifies that he's been using the creature as a live test subject, dissecting every detail about its brutal species to develop anti-orc battle tactics. Our prince asks if this is the so-called gift, and the old man smirks, saying there's no better present. Especially with war looming on the horizon, Yuri forces a grin back and thanks him, thinking Jaime has to be completely unhinged to use captured orcs as live practice dummies. Spotting the nervous look on one of his knights, a man named Simon, he turns to him. He tells Simon to just spit out whatever he's thinking. Simon admits that this whole situation is messed up using a prisoner of war like this, even if it's only an orc. Hearing this, the prince agrees that he's not wrong, and then issues a command to Sir Jaime. Open the cell door. The reinforced gate grinds open, and the orc stalks out, absolutely seething with fury. As Yuri turns back to Simon, he orders him to get some real-world combat experience against an actual orc. Just as the massive beast roars and shatters the stone beneath its feet, Simon steps up to the challenge, bracing himself for the fight. But right after, the orc just collapses, face-planting on the ground. Simon stares, utterly confused. He turns around and repeats that it's just wrong to fight a captive orc, one that has been imprisoned and has clearly lost its will to live. But that tiny moment of distraction is all the opening the orc needs to slam a fist into his skull, nearly caving it in. The other knights start to panic. The orc violently wrenches Simon into a headlock with one massive bicep, clearly using him as a human shield. A voice cries out, pleading with our boy to save the knight, while Sir Jaime coolly notes that the orc has already been worn down. The beast begins to bark out what sounds like complete nonsense. It keeps the knight locked up tight, as if it perfectly understands how a hostage situation works. Our hero is totally thrown off. He never imagined the monster would be smart enough to take someone hostage. Sir Jaime then casually says he'll go get a translator. At that moment, a hooded figure peeks out from the shadows, and Jaime immediately orders the person to come forward. Yuri is looking completely lost, but the hooded figure, whose name is Corey, starts translating as the orc snarls again. He reports that the creature is making a simple threat: let it go free, or the knight dies. As if to prove its point, the orc yanks the knight's arm so hard he screams in pain. Our hero calls Hernando forward. The mage instantly conjures a spell in his hand. He then unleashes a blast of binding magic that wraps around the orc, catching it completely off guard. He gives the signal. Our boy moves like a blur. He dives in, rips the knight free, and leaves the orc roaring in absolute fury. He shoots a look at Sir Jaime, basically asking if this is some kind of special edition orc. The Margrave confirms it, adding that this one is terrifyingly intelligent. He explains that when they first snagged the creature, it was chomping on knights like they were gummy bears. This sends one of the knights into a blind rage who charges forward, screaming for blood, but our hero just tells him to take a major chill pill. Yuri clarifies that he's not stopping him out of some misguided mercy, then gestures to something lurking behind the orc. In the background, rows of caged monsters are locked in a death stare with the knights, looking like they're ready to rip them to shreds. The second they get an opening, it's over. He warns them that the actual battlefield will be infinitely more savage. Then he drops the bomb. This is just the tutorial. A little while later, 3 knights find themselves squaring off against a pack of orcs. One of the beasts tries to get an edge by swinging a fiery torch, but Hernando just throws up a mana shield, shutting it down with 0 effort. In the chaos, another knight finishes off his opponent. As he stands over the body, our hero gives him a proud clap, but the knights themselves look more disturbed than triumphant. Yuri gets it. This whole thing feels wrong since the orcs are practically sitting ducks, but he hammers home that the knights need every brutal second of this training. For the war to come, Sir Jaime admits this inhumane training clashes with their code of honor, but his voice turns to ice as he states such monsters are not worthy of mercy. With that settled, he guides them deeper down a corridor, explaining that the orcs they fought were nothing more than empty shells. He continues, detailing the unspeakable horrors prisoners face in the orc camps, before pausing at a massive, reinforced door. He warns them that the twisted result of those acts is waiting for them inside. As the knights peer into the room, their eyes widen in absolute horror. Before them stand half-orcs. Yuri, however, doesn't even flinch, only remarking that their numbers are greater than he anticipated. Sir Jaime grimly lays out the sickening truth. Orcs abduct humans for forced breeding, and these abominations are the outcome. Our hero looks the old man in the eye and asks if he hates the orcs. Sir Jaime's reply is instant and laced with venom. He despises them with every cell in his body, and he swears he won't rest until every single one is erased. Our boy clocks the chilling calm in his voice and thinks to himself that everyone has a sworn enemy. For Sir Jaime, his sole purpose in life is to eradicate every last orc. It makes a horrifying kind of sense, especially since he was the one who discovered his own son's corpse. In one of their wretched villages, that storm of grief and fury still blazes in his eyes. The next morning, Yuri is perched on a cliff, taking in the sunrise, when Sir Jaime approaches with a request. Take Cory with you. Our boy remembers him, the translator from the day before. A slight smile touches his lips. He praises the man's fluency in the orc language, calling it an insanely valuable skill. Cory opens his mouth to explain something, but our hero cuts him short, saying he's already aware. He tosses a gauntlet to him, leaving the half-orc completely floored. Then he tells him to quit worrying and just focus on the job. Cory sputters, insisting he can't possibly accept such a priceless gift. But Yuri just blows him off and calls out for Raymond, asking the knight if they're getting close to the border. Raymond confirms it and mentions that monster hordes are a rarity out here. Yuri just shakes his head, warning him not to let his guard down. Even at the border, a horde is always a possibility, and their mission objective is to wipe them off the face of the planet. The scene then cuts to a merchant caravan, where the travelers are looking around with a growing sense of dread. Just as they realize something is deeply wrong, armed riders burst from the trees, charging them with blades already drawn. Their leader doesn't hesitate for a second, his blade carving through the merchants in a savage, brutal arc. The ground turns red as the encounter becomes an absolute bloodbath. We snap back to the prince, riding his horse and looking back thoughtfully. He thinks to himself that it would be a catastrophe if anyone found out that Cory is a half-orc. Still, he did leave him in Hernando's care. For the time being, there shouldn't be any problems. He glances at the map in his hand and then calls out to Jared, informing the knight that he's been assigned to scout ahead. Jared immediately looks terrified, knowing the area is crawling with monsters. Jared tries to argue that the monsters usually scatter when they approach, but the prince completely shuts him down. He says they're going to have to face them sooner or later anyway. Then Yuri starts to needle him, asking if he's too terrified to handle the task. Jared just stands there, fuming in silence as the prince keeps poking at him. Finally, after being mocked one too many times, he spins around and storms off to complete the mission, which brings a victorious grin to our hero's face. Riding up to join him, Sir Raymond points out that the prince is giving Jared some very special attention, and our boy just replies that he gets a kick out of messing with him. Changing gears, the prince asks Raymond why he decided to join the war. Raymond admits it's been a long time since he was asked that, but his reason has never wavered. He declares it with absolute conviction, that he fights for the sole purpose of keeping Brielle safe, which earns a faint smile from Yuri. The prince then orders him to take command of the main unit. He says he wants to go check on Jared personally, before kicking his horse into a gallop and racing ahead. It isn't long before he spots a hidden camp, and in a flash, he ambushes a hooded figure lurking on the edge of it. Our hero warns his new prisoner to keep silent if he values his life. Just then, Jared calls out that he found exactly what they were hunting for, gesturing emphatically toward the camp just ahead. He sputters that it belongs to the bandits. The prince figures their captive is just some lookout, but something feels off. Why would the leader send only a single man? Trembling, the bandit frantically insists the prince's guess is spot on. He swears he's nothing more than a low-level grunt. Then, a flash of crimson dangling from the man's neck snags the prince's gaze. Ripping the necklace free, Yuri demands to know what it is. The terrified bandit reveals. Their leader forces them to wear it on every patrol. With his sword drawn, the prince presses him. What kind of enchantment is woven into the artifact? The bandit swears he has no idea, so our hero decides he's a dead end. Turning away, Yuri boldly declares he'll just hunt down the bandit chief and rip the truth out of him personally. A few hours drag on, and the sun begins its descent as the two continue their scouting mission. Suddenly, Jared's voice cuts through the silence. He's spotted movement. He reports their soldiers are in position with a few scouts already pushing ahead. The prince asks if the knights can handle the cleanup after he unleashes his inner barbarian on the thugs. Jared just freezes, completely blindsided by the question, but Yuri offers no explanation. Instead, he tells Jared to get a move on if he wants to rack up a kill count. With that, he explodes forward, completely ignoring Jared's frantic shouts that it's a suicide mission to charge in alone. Our hero couldn't care less, barking orders to advance as he spearheads the assault. Inside, the bandits hear the chaos erupting and wonder what in the world is happening. They look up just in time to see the sun blotted out by a shadow before the prince comes crashing down on them. They are too paralyzed with shock to even move as our hero greets them with a chillingly innocent smile. By the time night has fully blanketed the sky, the knights finally storm the camp. There, they discover the prince, just chilling by a small campfire, smack in the middle of a field of bodies, and openly mocking them. He cracks a joke about them taking their sweet time. Jared, gasping for air, chews him out for pulling such a reckless stunt, but Yuri just shoots back that they should have been faster. He then pivots to Raymond, all business, asking for a report. Raymond confirms all the stragglers have been mopped up, and, more importantly, they didn't lose a single night. In high spirits, the prince commands his men to gather whatever meat they can find for dinner. He declares that tonight's special is mystery meat on a stick. Jared groans that the gamey stench will be nauseating, but Yuri just smirks. He says Jared just doesn't have the palate for a real warrior's meal. As they discuss setting up for the night, a bandit playing dead slowly starts to push himself up. Raymond then informs the prince their next destination is Gid, warning they'll likely cross paths with another army. Over there, while casually kicking the zombie bandit in the face, our hero asks which nation they might run into. Raymond's expression turns grim as he answers it might be the Holy Kingdom itself. Yuri states the obvious. The Holy Kingdom's soldiers are packing divine healing magic. Raymond advises that it's probably smart to stay on their good side, so they have medics to patch up their wound down the line. He then mentions the commander of this particular force is a young princess. Rumor has it she's already on track to be booted from the line of succession, which is exactly why she's desperate to score a major victory. The news sends Yuri deep into thought, and Raymond asks if he wants the knights to dig up some more intel on her. Yuri waves him off, saying there's no need, since he can just ask the princess himself. Gid is the central checkpoint for all allied forces marching toward Balshad. But even though the city is supposed to be a major supply hub, it's completely isolated, and everyone who enters has to play by the local rules. Halting his troops outside the walls, our hero orders Raymond to whip their men into shape before they go inside. The scene cuts to the Lord of Gid, who greets the prince with a massive smile. They shake hands, and Yuri offers his profound thanks for Gid's support. The Lord lets out a booming laugh, reminiscing about how Fior Briol gave the orcs hell back in his day, and our hero swears he'll live up to the family name. At that exact moment, a butler rushes in, whispering something urgently to the old man. The Lord immediately announces the princess has arrived, and asks if the prince would care to meet her. Yuri agrees, and moments later, the holy princess makes her grand entrance. The Lord greets her warmly as she strides in, clad in shimmering plate armor and flanked by her personal guard. She introduces herself with cold formality, and the Lord says it's an honor. But the instant her eyes fall on Yuri, she gives him a nasty side-eye and bluntly asks if he's one of the Lord's servants. The jab completely throws him for a loop, and before anyone can react, she adds that he should make himself scarce like a good boy. As the higher-ups try to hash things out, the Lord attempts to lay out the situation, but one of the knights completely blows a gasket and starts screaming right in Yuri's face. Our hero, totally unfazed by the drama, introduces himself as the third prince of Braya. That bombshell drops, and the entire room goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop for a solid few seconds before the knight stammers out some kind of apology. But Yuri, ever the drama king, cuts him off, claiming it was all his fault for dressing so casually. The princess just facepalms hard. All her other knights are bowing their heads, begging for forgiveness. Even after T shows up, our hero keeps messing with the princess, asking if his fit really makes him look that broke. She tries to play it cool, quietly begging him to stop, but Yuri is absolutely living for this moment. At last, he cuts the act and properly introduces himself, offering his hand, which the princess reluctantly takes. He gets curious and asks her age. She tells him she's 20. He just smirks, revealing that he's only 18, and then declares he's going to talk to her casually from now on. The Lord is absolutely thrilled by this turn of events, saying he's stoked the two forces can bond over smashing monsters. Sevilla just awkwardly goes along with it. The prince then starts grilling her about her missing soldiers, and she explains they're scheduled to arrive a day late. He immediately voices his concern that something bad might have happened to them. The princess fires back that her troops are incredibly disciplined, and demands to know exactly what he's implying. He explains that orcs are notorious for setting traps and launching ambushes on enemy troops, a fact the Lord immediately confirms. Yuri just waves it off, saying that it shouldn't be a problem for the legendary troops of the Holy Kingdom. Still, he warns Sevilla to keep his words in mind. A little later, Hernando asks our hero for his take on the Holy Knights. Yuri calls them way too old school, and predicts the princess is about to get into some serious trouble very soon. Still, he admits she has some potential before switching gears and asking Hernando if he's positive the necklace was from this area. The mage is dead sure this is the only place an item like that could possibly be sold. Our hero remembers how those red stones are specifically designed to be orc bait, triggering a berserker fury that makes them go wild. He wonders out loud if the item might be an artifact. Hernando agrees, even though it looks way too flimsy to be the real deal. They leave the salty shopkeeper behind, while Hernando mutters that somebody must have completely cleared out the stock. Yuri looks totally unimpressed, but in that moment, Hernando points ahead, buzzing with excitement. He blurts out that the knights are gambling in a bar. A slow smirk spreads across the prince's face as he says he absolutely can't let that stand. He goes on to say that a true military force has to lead by example, and Hernando is just eating it up, nodding frantically with every word. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, one of the holy knights asks Sevilla if her meeting with the Lord was a success. The vice captain immediately butts in, saying he's heard that the Prince of Braya is not to be trusted. He continues to throw shade at Yuri, and even starts bad-mouthing Braya itself. Sevilla sharply warns him to watch his tone, but the guy completely ignores her, continuing his tirade about the prince's awful manners and his seriously questionable fashion choices. His insults keep escalating until he just comes right out and says that Yuri is going to die in this war. That finally gets him a sharp shut up from the princess. The vice captain finally zips it, and Sevilla changes the subject, asking about the status of their soldiers. Fennec confidently brushes it off, telling her to chill out and leave it all to him. He then excuses himself, announcing he's about to head out on patrol. The moment he's gone, Sevilla lets out a huge sigh of relief. A while later, Fennec strolls into the bar, which is absolutely packed. Scanning the rowdy scene, he squints and demands to know what unit that noisy bunch belongs to. One of the knights tells him they're Braya's men, and a look of disgust crosses his face as he watches them playing cards. He scoffs at their pathetic discipline and roasts them for ignoring orders and regulations. Another knight snaps back, throwing a jab that Braya's knights are useless garbage, just like their leader. Fennec declares that he can't let this reckless behavior slide. He loses it, screaming that he can't take it anymore as he storms toward them, shouting and demanding what the hell they think they're doing. He accuses them of treating this alliance like some kind of a joke, and keeps on ranting about how disgraceful they are. Just then, a voice cuts him off as our hero claps a hand on his shoulder and asks for his name. But instead of just answering, the dude starts running his mouth. He says Yuri's awful attitude is bound to infect his own soldiers. Then he taunts him, claiming they need someone who can actually throw down, not some guy who sits around playing cards. To top it all off, he smugly adds that he's certain our boy has never even held a real sword, so his expectations are literally zero. But the prince tunes out all that static and calmly asks if the Holy Kingdom has no rules about basic manners, seeing as the man still hadn't answered his question. That single comeback sends the vice captain into a full-blown panic. Right at the exact moment the captain herself walks into the pub, her voice cuts through the pub, sharp as a whip. "What are you doing in here? You're supposed to be on patrol." He stammers out some pathetic excuse, but she's not having it. "Get outside. Now. Do your job." With one last nervous glance at his captain, he practically bolts from the tavern. She turns to Yuri, an apology on her lips, but he just waves it off. "Don't even sweat it. Trust me. I know how hard it is to keep soldiers in line." He tells her with a smirk, "You can just make it up to me next time." He sees the tension coiled in her shoulders, and it all clicks. This is what Raymond was talking about. "Look," he says, backing off. "Not my circus. Not my monkeys." He immediately pivots his attention back to his card game. Outside, the vice captain confronts her. "Are you really friends with the Prince of Briol?" She shuts him down with an icy glare. "You got a problem with that?" Hearing her tone, the vice captain makes it clear that he's already laid out all his concerns, but their conversation is cut short by a soldier sprinting toward them. He collapses to the ground, gasping for air and begging forgiveness for his intrusion, but he's carrying a critical dispatch from the main force. The captain cuts straight to the point. "What happened?" The messenger's words are a gut punch. The main troops are getting absolutely hammered by orcs. The city's lord immediately asks if she's really deploying this late at night, even suggesting she request aid from the Briol army, arguing that it would be the best way to minimize the damage. Hearing this, the vice captain explodes, spitting that the Holy Kingdom doesn't need anyone's help. He aggressively asks the lord if he's implying the Holy Kingdom can't crush a few orcs. The lord insists that's not what he meant at all, and the captain steps in. "It's fine. I understand your concern, but this is a task we can handle ourselves." With that settled, the Holy Kingdom's army mobilizes, a river of steel vanishing into the darkness to save their comrades. The second they're out of earshot, the lord quietly orders his subordinate to notify the Briol army about the attack and plead for their assistance, because deep down, he knows they're out of time and can't take on the orcs alone. Over at the Briol army camp, the prince reads the letter, and without a change in expression, tells Raymond the lord is requesting their help to back up the Holy Kingdom. The prince then states they absolutely should not accept the plea. The reason? The request isn't an official one from the Holy Kingdom itself. He knows for a fact that the hot-headed vice captain was just letting his pride talk, and then orders Raymond to prep their forces for the fight ahead. He also sends Roy to drag the soldiers out of the bars and back into formation, who instantly dashes off into the bustling market. Once all the preparations are complete, he decides he's going to thoroughly enjoy this surprise night raid and begins marching toward the battlefield. alongside his soldiers. He called out, "Are you all drunk?" And a thunderous, cheerful roar answers him back. They're not drunk, they're just hyped for the brawl. He then checks on Jared, asking if he's feeling okay because he looks a bit green, but Jared reassures him once more that he's good to go. Roland approaches the prince, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I'm seriously impressed. Not only did you forgive the Holy Knights, but now you're riding out to save them. For doing that, you're a true leader." Hearing that, Yuri briefly wonders if Roland was always this dependable, or if he's just seeing a totally different side of him now, and he realizes it's because he himself has undergone a massive change. A scout's voice suddenly bellows, "I see them. The Holy Knights are in sight," and the prince declares, "This is our first dance with the orcs. Boys." His voice rings out over the legion. "I will be the first one to charge in, and the last one to pull out. In the name of the third prince of Briol, I order every single one of you to make it back alive." As the Holy Knights thunder toward the fight, their captain is kicking herself. She was sloppy, and she completely failed to anticipate a potential ambush. Recalling some sage advice, it hits her like a ton of bricks. She should have been far more cautious. The captain yells to Fennec that they're targeting the orc commander, because they need to put a swift end to this battle. The vice captain barks orders for the soldiers to form a charge line, ready to crash into the orc horde, and the soldiers rush toward the enemy line without a moment's hesitation. She begins an incantation, a holy light washing over her troops, to give their abilities a massive power-up. As they charge deeper toward the enemy, they run right over a shimmering magic circle. It's a devastating trap. The moment they cross it, the ground convulses violently before shattering beneath them. The Holy Knights, along with their war horses, plummet into the gaping chasm. The captain's stomach drops as she falls, wondering if she's made yet another terrible call, a thought that sends her spiraling into her past. You see, she was hailed as a prodigy, praised by everyone for wielding holy powers, at an impossibly young age. That praise was a drug, and to keep getting her fix, she pushed herself to master the sword. She even started beating her own brother in duels, but it turned out to be the single worst decision of her life, because after that, her brother forced her onto the front lines of every single war. He spun tales about how she'd ascend to heaven if she fought for God, but the cold reality was that he was setting her up to die in battle so he could claim the throne uncontested. Snapping back to the present, she groans and pushes herself to her feet. The captain barks at everyone to hold the line, but her blood runs cold when she realizes they're all drenched in oil, with orcs looming on the ridge above. Each one holds a flaming torch. This was never just an ambush, it was a death trap designed to burn them alive. Desperation claws at the captain as she scrambles for a plan, any plan, to get her people out of this inferno. Just as her hope begins to crumble, a blur of motion descends from above, obliterating the orcs. Our boy is there, telling her to wake up and asking if it's really that impossible, to call for backup. A rope drops into the pit, and the knights scramble up it, escaping the oily death trap. She tells him she's in his debt, while the vice captain, now totally humbled, salutes the prince and begs forgiveness for his earlier disrespect. The guy swears he'll never forget this moment for the rest of his dead-end existence. The prince just waves it off, saying he's confident. The Holy Kingdom will have Brielle's back whenever they call. With the immediate crisis over, our boy spots the remaining orcs trying to slip away. They failed their mission to wipe out the Holy Knights, and now they're running scared. He roars for the soldiers to hunt them down, leaving no survivors. Suddenly, the prince locks eyes on the Orkwall's personal banner. His whole demeanor shifts, ready for a boss fight, as the captain watches with a knot of worry in her stomach. The orc chieftain whips up his bow, launching a lightning-fast arrow straight for our boy's heart. But with a flash of steel, he splits the projectile perfectly in half. He can feel the commander's rage boiling over, practically aimed at him personally, so he decides to lean into it. With a smirk, he tells the captain he'll be right back. But she grabs his arm, her eyes wide. "You're seriously going to 1v1 an entire squad? That's not brave, it's insane." Our boy doesn't even bother with a reply. He just explodes into a dead sprint, straight toward the orc line. One of the brutes spots him coming, and hurls a spear with everything he's got. As the weapon screams through the air, our boy is thrown back into a memory from 5 years prior. He remembers Bernard explaining the heart-soul slash. The old master taught him that battle is pure chaos, with a million variables that can shift the tide in an instant. The only way to counter that chaos is to master every possible scenario, unless you have the heart-soul slash. For one breathtaking moment, the technique cranks all your senses to the absolute limit, allowing you to instantly process the entire battlefield and guide your blade for the most devastatingly efficient strike. Back then, a younger Yuri didn't understand a single word of Bernard's philosophical rambling. He just pleaded with him to explain it like he was 5. Bernard just laughed, telling him he'd understand when the moment arrived. In the heat of a true battle, his instincts would take over, Snapping back to the present, he effortlessly sidesteps the first spear, then launches himself airborne, twisting his body to evade the second. He lands perfectly on the spear's shaft, using it as a springboard to propel himself even higher into the chaos. From there, he dives down like a hawk, his sword a silver blur that carves through orc after orc, before they can even process what's happening. But his rampage is cut short when 3 more orcs converge on his position. After being on the battlefield for so long, even he knows that taking on 3 at once head-on is reckless. A thrill runs through him. As the orcs charge, he activates his technique, his mind calculating the single most perfect path to victory. In one fluid motion, his sword dances through the air, dicing all 3 of them into pieces. His technique is so ridiculously advanced that his physical body can barely contain the speed of his thoughts. He then snatches a spear from the ground and lets out a primal roar, calling out the orc wall directly. He hurls the spear with incredible force. The orc wall moves to block it, but it was a feint. The real target was the war banner, which is skewered and sent tumbling to the dirt. That's it. The orc wall is officially rage-baited. He bellows for his forces to withdraw, screaming that he will handle this disrespectful human himself. The prince expected the orc army to swarm him, but instead, their leader decided to prevent more pointless deaths, ordering a full retreat. Our boy's whole plan was just a little payback for that cheap shot with the arrow from earlier. As the dust settles, Sevilla comes sprinting toward our hero, frantically asking if he's hurt. He just gives her a reassuring smile, telling her not to worry about a thing. He casually remarks that the battle seems to be over, and asks how it feels to score her first W as part of the Allied forces. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she tells him they only made it out alive because he showed up when he did. Miles away, Orkwall is seething, consumed by the humiliating defeat and a burning hunger for revenge. The scene cuts to a rowdy inn, where Jared is regaling a captivated audience with the epic saga of the prince, who single-handedly charged in to rescue the princess. The other soldiers are eating it up, but another knight scoffs, saying he heard, "Our hero was just some lazy bum who did nothing but gamble." Ronald immediately jumps to his defense, declaring that the prince absolutely carries the spirit of a true royal. He then promises to tell the knights every legendary detail he witnessed. The other soldiers just laugh, joking that the guy is completely wasted. Across the room, Asana quietly eats, convinced that Yuri is far too skilled to be a simple nobleman, especially since he instantly identified her as an assassin. And yet, he deliberately walked onto a battlefield, and always acts like he's 10 steps ahead of everyone else. The assassin calls over the innkeeper, saying she's trying to find someone. She describes her target as a swordsman with brown hair, who's ridiculously skilled, a description that, she admits, hardly narrows it down at all. She then mentions the guy had a weird-as-hell accent, and just like that, everything clicks for the old innkeeper. He confirms the man didn't have brown hair, but the accent was unmistakable. The innkeeper even recalls his bizarre order, a rice dish, hold the rice, and he was asking for the route to Balshad. A satisfied smirk plays on her lips as she tosses him a coin. The innkeeper catches the money, grateful for the unexpected tip. Asuna's mind races. Balshad is the rendezvous point for the Allied forces. This mysterious figure is tracing the exact same path as our hero. She realizes she needs to track him down, and fast. This man is one of the 10 strongest fighters in the entire land, the legendary swordsman from the east. The camera then pans back to our hero, who is leading his troops out of Gid, and onward to their next objective. The long journey forces them to camp out a few nights, but they are taking zero chances, especially after witnessing the orcs' savage brutality firsthand. Yuri smirks, noting that the soldiers have already adapted to the new routine, barely needing any instruction. Raymond agrees, adding that they've run the drills so many times it's become pure muscle memory. The prince then tells the knight he's going to scout the perimeter for a bit on his own. Stepping beyond the campfire's glow, he's immediately struck by the eerie silence of the woods. He scans the darkened tree line, his senses on high alert as he thinks about how the odds of an ambush skyrocket after dark. Abruptly, a string of screamed curses shatters the quiet, yanking his attention. Moving stealthily toward the noise, he finds 2 knights ganging up on someone. These 2 absolute scumbags are verbally tearing into Corey, driving the poor half-orc to the verge of tears. One of them even has the audacity to accuse the translator of being a spy for the monsters. Corey frantically denies the charge, swearing he would never dream of doing such a thing. This only enrages the knight, who violently seizes the translator's arm and rips off his gauntlet. He snarls, demanding to know where a freak like him stole it from, but the terrified guy can only stammer his denials. Before the situation can explode, our hero decides he's seen enough and steps out of the shadows. He confronts the knights, his voice ice-cold as he demands to know what the hell they think they're doing. The trash-tier soldiers try to stammer out some lame excuses, but Yuri cuts them off. He tells them to get a grip and get lost. Immediately, paralyzed with fear by the prince's presence. The knights snap to attention, and then bolt from the scene as if their lives depended on it. Our hero then turns to Corey, his voice softening as he asks if he's okay. The half-orc shakily thanks him for the rescue. Yuri then asks if he wants the two men punished for what they did, but the kind-hearted translator forgives them, saying that it's natural for people to prefer beautiful things. So it's just common sense, he adds, that they would despise someone as grotesque as him. He explains that receiving special help like this actually makes his ultimate dream feel meaningless, which piques the prince's curiosity. The half-orc clarifies that his only goal in life is to be able to live peacefully among everyone else. Yuri thinks to himself that a dream like that might be completely unattainable. He knows that Corey's role as a translator is useful for now, but everything could change the moment the war is over. Our boy pats him on the head reassuringly and asks how his training with Hernando is coming along. He strongly encourages the translator to learn magic from the old mage, telling him he'll need a tangible skill to make a life for himself among humans. Later that night, the prince calls a council meeting, asking for a report on their ambush preparedness. Raymond replies that their supply caches have all been fortified with fireproof blankets, and they have significantly increased the number of guards on patrol. Jared scoffs, questioning if all these measures are truly necessary, and griping that they already have too many sentries on watch. Yuri taps a spot on the map, explaining that they are deep in orc territory, where anything goes. He stresses the high probability that the orcs will use fire as a weapon, just like they did before. As if on cue, a guard bursts into the tent, screaming that the enemy is attacking. The leadership team rushes outside into a scene of total pandemonium, finding the camp swarming with orcs, amidst raging wildfires. All of a sudden, a massive barrel is launched high into the air, culminating in a deafening explosion. The sheer force of the blast catches Yuri by surprise. It's bizarre, he thinks, that orcs would be capable of wielding explosive magic. He immediately turns to Hernando, asking for their next move. The mage's response is blunt. They have to eliminate the squad launching the explosives. Our hero instantly barks orders at Jared and Raymond to command the defense, while he personally hunts down whoever is masterminding this chaotic assault. He turns back to the mage, asking which direction the magic is originating from. Hernando points straight into the fiery darkness. Without a moment's hesitation, our hero says, "I'll be right back," blasts off at full speed. His eyes widen in disbelief. When he finally lays eyes on the brains behind the ambush, the orc clad in crimson armor is none other than Orkvol, the very same monster our hero completely humiliated in their last battle. Closing the gap, our hero roars, demanding to know if this was all his doing. But the monstrous orc remains utterly silent. Instead, Orkvol hefts his enormous weapon and smashes it downward. Our hero barely manages to parry the blow. The raw power of the impact sends the prince staggering backward, but a thrilled, almost manic grin spreads across his face. He instantly recognizes that Orkvol isn't just more intelligent. His movements are now fluid and deadly. Like those of a true warrior, Yuri tries to create some distance, but the orc gives him zero breathing room and lunges with another devastating swing. Our hero dodges it with clean precision. This deadly game of cat and mouse continues for a moment before our boy manages to parry another bone-crushing blow. He instantly retaliates, unleashing a ferocious counter that smashes into the monster as he channels pure mana through his sword. He has to admit, Orkvol is on a whole different level from your average, run-of-the-mill orc. His blood, now pumping, he declares it's time to find out what this monster is really made of, and explodes forward with a lightning-fast strike. Orkvol sidesteps the attack and unleashes a pulverizing blow of his own. Rocking that main character plot armor, the prince rolls out of the danger zone with a smirk. Just then, the orc begins to seethe with dark mana, blatantly copying the prince's own technique. Yuri lets out a sigh, thinking he totally should have seen that coming. He remembers the orcs using spell incantations for that explosion magic, and it clicks. If an orc shaman can bend mana to their will, then this Orkvol dude has to be one of their elite warriors. The prince wastes no time, activating his Soul Reaper /skill, while the beast just stands its ground, unfazed. The orc swings its weapon at our boy, only to get a sword rammed directly through its throat. To the prince's utter shock, Orkvol's muscles clamp down on the steel blade, refusing to let him pull it free. Yuri's eyes widen as he realizes the monster must have poured every ounce of mana into its neck, just to cheat death. The orc starts roaring insults in its guttural language, while hoisting its massive axe high above its head. In that split second, our hero wrenches his sword free, shearing off 3 of Orkvol's fingers in the process as he scrambles to evade the incoming counter. But the beast's axe still tears a gash across his shoulder, missing his head by mere inches. The close call just makes Yuri's grin wider. He gets it now. Regular attacks aren't going to cut it against an opponent this tough. Cloaking his blade in a dense, shimmering aura of mana, he taunts Orkvol to stop stalling and get on with it. The two combatants square up, their powerful auras crackling in the air. In a blinding flash, their weapons collide, triggering a colossal explosion. As the towering column of smoke begins to fade, a shattered axe is revealed lying on the ground. Our hero stares down with a brutally cold gaze at the defeated orc, who collapses onto its knees. Lifting his sword with both hands, the prince announces that this fight is over. Then he brings the blade down without an ounce of mercy, sending a shower of red everywhere. Standing over the mangled form of Orkval, he grips his sword, noting that the powerhouse is somehow still breathing. The prince figures that, since this monster is clearly a high-ranking elite, he must be sitting on a goldmine of juicy intel. Wiping the blood from his cheek, he mutters that it would be a shame to dispose of this piece of trash just yet. From a distance, the knights call out to him as they sprint over. They ask if the prince is hurt, their eyes widening when they see that his opponent was the infamous Orkval. Yuri just tells them he's fine, and a knight reports that the situation at the camp has been contained. He gives them a nod for a job well done before ordering them to round up every last orc, starting with this giant sack of garbage. Staring down at the broken Orkval, he proclaims that it's officially time to start asking these monsters some questions. The scene then cuts back to the camp, where our hero is getting his injuries looked at by a healer. When asked what happened, he just says the monster got him, but the mage trolls him, saying it looked a lot more like he was getting ragdolled. After patching him up, Hernando remarks that the wound wasn't life-threatening, so he really dodged a bullet this time. As the prince starts to leave, the mage stops him and signals his men to bring something forward. Hernando then unveils a massive royal throne, so Yuri can conduct the interrogation with the proper amount of style. Completely thrown off by the over-the-top chair, the prince just raises an eyebrow, but the mage simply states a commander needs to have a certain flair. Trying to play it cool, our boy mutters that he might as well give it a try so their hard work doesn't go to waste. Our hero leans back into the plush chair, admitting that it's actually not half bad. Clearing his throat, he makes a formal announcement that the interrogation session is now in session. The prince commands his men to bring the orcs before him, one at a time. A few moments later, a knight grabs a screaming orc and shoves its head straight into the roaring campfire. When the orc life subscription officially expires, its limp body thuds to the ground, terrifying the other prisoners into silence. Yuri then declares that every orc will get exactly one chance to answer his question. He demands to know who gave the order for the night raid, and the orc in front of him just roars back angrily. Corey offers to translate, but our boy already knows the monster is just talking smack. Without even hesitating, our hero calls for Jared. Jared immediately gives the defiant orc the exact same fiery treatment. The other monsters watch in absolute dread as the second corpse collapses to the ground, levitating several mana-laced blades in the air around him. The prince coldly explains that he is going to ask one very simple question. Based on how they answer, he will decide if their journey to the afterlife is merciful or agonizing. He drives the point home by plunging one of the blades into a charred corpse and nonchalantly tells Jared to get rid of the garbage. At that very moment, one of the orcs finally speaks, and Corey translates that they're nothing more than low-level grunts. But the elite orc immediately sells out his commander, Orkval, claiming he knows exactly who gave the orders. He pleads for his life, offering up the intel as a trade. Our hero cracks a knowing smile. He can sense this one isn't bluffing. He presses him. Was it an Orkva who commanded this night raid? A wave of confused whispers spreads through the knights. None of them have a clue what that name signifies. Quick lore drop. An Orkva isn't just any orc, he's the absolute king of the species. This dude is the entire reason the allied forces are mobilizing to begin with. In this whole war, he's the one ultimate boss, the one they have to take down, no matter the cost. Back to the interrogation, Corey translates the elite's question. He's asking if he'll get to live for snitching, and our boy confirms the deal. After a few more guttural sounds, the half-orc explains that Orkval is demanding a pledge before he spills the beans. This visibly annoys the prince, who knows that breaking a pledge is the equivalent of throwing away your honor. He smirks, remarking that he's surprised a savage orc would even care about a human custom like that. Regardless, Yuri agrees to the pledge. Jared, on the other hand, is having none of it. He explodes. Are you seriously going to let this monster walk? Only for the prince to tell him to stand down. Corey then delivers the translated intel. It was the chieftain of the Orkva who carried out the king's orders. Our hero immediately follows up, demanding to know how the monsters discovered their travel route. The half-orc translates the answer. Apparently, the king has a special method for gathering intel, though the elite doesn't know the exact details. Jared confirms what he's hearing, and clarifies. So the Orkva himself pinpointed our location and greenlit the assault? The prince deduces this must have been how they ambushed the Holy Kingdom as well, but he knows this interrogation isn't finished. He leans in for one final question. Just how powerful is this Orkva, really? The Orkval erupts into a fit of insane laughter, and Corey translates the chilling boast. Even if every single one of the other elites combined their power, they wouldn't stand a ghost of a chance against him. The captured monster swears, His king is the most powerful being in the entire world. Yuri calmly concedes that it might just be true, but he warns the beast that there are other things it should fear more. He pulls out the necklace, commenting that humans are far more brutal than orcs could ever imagine. He dangles the bait in front of the enraged prisoner, asking if he's really going to break his sacred pledge. In that instant, the other knights notice the orcs' restraints are loosening and immediately draw their weapons. With a thunderous roar, the Orc-Val charges straight for our hero, but Yuri just smirks, ice cold, as he calls him out for being a pledge breaker. He signals his men, who instantly form a steel cage around the monster. Turning his back, Yuri gives the kill order and walks away, his aura at max level. A bit later, inside the packed medical tent, the priest is in overdrive, healing the wounded soldiers. He moves from one to the next, pouring his healing energy into every man writhing in pain. The poor guy patches up one soldier only to immediately move to the next, running on pure fumes after hours of non-stop work. Just then, Hernando and Cory burst in, with Hernando telling the priest to start on the other side of the tent while he tackles this one. Cory comes in clutch with a bucket of water the priest had requested. After a quick thanks, the priest tells him to stand back. The priest channels his holy power into the bucket, and Cory can feel a strange, potent energy begin to radiate from the water. He explains that it's now holy water and tells Cory to start cleaning the soldier's wounds with it. Suddenly, someone screams for the priest to help another gravely injured man, and Cory is just in awe of this guy's tireless spirit. The moment his healing spells connect, soldiers are freed from their agony, and Cory can't help but be blown away by his incredible magic. As the sun finally begins to rise, the three of them collapse together, finally getting a moment's rest. Hernando sighs, relieved that the worst seems to be over. The priest thanks him for his invaluable help, and the mage turns to praise Cory. He tells him he did an amazing job too, but Cory gets all bashful, insisting he barely did anything useful. My guy clearly doesn't know how to take a compliment. The priest expresses his gratitude that their losses weren't heavier, and the mage adds that it was all because they snuffed out the fire before it could rage through the camp. Still, the priest confesses he fears something worse is always on the horizon, praying for divine protection. But Hernando says that even in the bleakest moments, there's always a glimmer of hope. He points over to the soldiers gathered around a campfire, singing and trying to lift each other's spirits. He notes that only hours before, these same men were fighting for their very survival, but now they're focused on healing together. All of a sudden, the mage waves his hand, conjuring a cascade of brilliant fireworks that light up the dawning sky. Our magic can reignite their hope, he explains. Watching the display, Cory looks up, completely mesmerized. He turns to the mage and asks, "Can you teach me magic?" Hearing this, Hernando looks genuinely shocked that someone, for the first time, actually wants to be his student. After all this time, he ruffles Cory's hair and asks what ignited this sudden drive to learn. The half-orc confesses that, at first, it was the prince's suggestion, but now his motivation is entirely his own. He's convinced magic is a source of happiness, and he's determined to wield it to help people. A smile graces the mage's lips as he thinks to himself what a noble goal that is. Cory is absolutely beaming just imagining his magic training. The scene cuts to a sprawling grass field, where a soldier sprints over to report that knights from the Empire are requesting an audience. Eric immediately asks if he's actually going, but Yuri states that they have no choice, since they're already close to the meeting point. With no time to spare, the prince instructs the soldier to escort the knights to him. The head knight declares, "It's a pleasure to finally meet our prince in the flesh," and presents himself as Ripeo Artem, the second son of Count Jinan. Our boy extends a polite welcome, and asks whether the emperor has made it to Balshad. The knight reports that his unit was the vanguard, the first to arrive, and they've already deployed several soldiers to scout the path ahead. The prince's attention then abruptly shifts to the other knight, and Ripeo apologizes, explaining his companion isn't exactly in a condition to offer a proper greeting. The moment the man removes his helmet, our boy freezes in recognition, wondering how fate could have orchestrated such a twisted reunion. It's Graham Heartful, the absolute scum from his past life that our boy has desperately wanted to erase from existence. Graham greets the prince, identifying himself as the man who was stripped of his noble title. In his previous life, our prince had pleaded with this very man to spare him. Yuri plays along, saying it's an honor to meet the celebrated knight, but Graham just shakes his head, stating he is a knight no longer. And so, our prince asks the fallen warrior if he truly volunteered for this war of his own free will, and Graham confirms he did. Ripeo then cuts in, telling our hero not to worry about something so trivial, insisting the entire situation was the fault of an incompetent commander. Graham tries to silence him, but Ripeo is on a roll, arguing that the glory Graham secured for the Empire was still legendary. Ripeo refuses to back down. All the while, our prince is processing the true story behind how this man lost everything. He never in his wildest nightmares imagined he would encounter someone like him within the Allied forces. He's left wondering why one of the Empire's greatest heroes is here, looking so defeated. In the end, he masks his thoughts with a practiced smile, and says it's a true honor to meet a warrior of his caliber, having heard many tales of his legendary strength. Then he drops a bombshell proposal, asking if Graham would consider joining the Brielle army instead. You see, our prince is completely done with the arrogant knights of the Empire, but Graham is an entirely different story. In his past life, this man gave him a chance to survive, when no one else did. For that act of mercy, Graham must have faced unimaginable backlash and severe consequences. Driven by respect, our prince promises that the Brielle nation would treat him with the honor he deserves, but Graham, true to his character, respectfully declines the offer without a single shred of hesitation. The prince doesn't press him. He tells Graham directly that he honors his decision because a part of him already knew. Graham was never going to say yes in the first place. After a while, the Brielle army finally marches to the designated rendezvous point of the Allied forces, the colossal city of Balshad. This place is far larger and more breathtaking than anyone had anticipated. For a city located right in the heart of the plains, its sheer scale and influence are off the charts, and that fact alone leaves the prince in awe. He even mentions the stories he's heard, that for generations, the dukes ruling this city have all been formidable magicians. The mage, with their group, confirms the rumor with a nod, but quickly adds a word of caution. Apparently, the current duke has a fierce reputation, and might just eat the prince for breakfast if he's not careful. Hearing this, our boy imagines some rigid, old-fashioned, noble, completely stuck in the past. Ultimately, he shrugs it off, deciding he'll cross that bridge when he comes to it. But the moment they step through the castle gates, he's hit with a reality check. A stunningly beautiful young woman glides forward to welcome the Brielle army, and proudly announces that she is Mary Rose Entree, the Duke of Balshad. The prince is absolutely blindsided. He was picturing some wrinkly old man, not a gorgeous woman. The mage, of course, seizes the opportunity to tease him, reminding him that the times are changing. The Duke herself welcomes the knights with a warm smile before her eyes lock onto our boy. She calls out to him directly, and our prince steps forward without a beat, introducing himself as the army's commander. Mary gives him a brilliant smile, calls him handsome, and then asks his age out of nowhere. He tells her he's 18, and her grin widens as she notes that they are nearly the same age. As she sees it, this means they should have zero problems, reaching a mutual understanding. After their short conversation, our boy gets a pretty clear read on the Duke. She's the kind of woman who has perfected the art of weaponizing her charm and beauty to get exactly what she wants. Model. But for him, a smile like that is a total red flag. He coolly informs her that age is just a number, since friendship is all about vibing with someone, not how old they are. She just flashes another one of those cryptic grins, and then, bam, she summons the Knights of Bresson. With a confident smirk, she presents them to the Brielle squad, and announces that their two crews will be fighting as one unit. She tells them to get acquainted so they can build some real teamwork. Jared leans over to the mage, whispering, "What's her angle with all this?" The mage just shrugs, replying that it's just her style, and not to read too much into it. Jared then asks, "Hey, isn't Brucin that tiny nation squished up against the border?" The prince nods, confirming he's spot on, and explains that their fighters are absolute units, because they grew up battling the harsh seas. Just then, a grizzled warrior steps up, introducing himself as Jonathan, the commander of the Brucin forces. He pours the prince a drink, and Yuri eyes it suspiciously, asking if it's actually wine. Jonathan admits that such bougie stuff is out of place in a backwater country like Brucin, but offers it anyway. That small comment completely triggers one of Jonathan's men. The dude erupts, screaming about whether the prince is throwing shade on them, just because they're from the countryside. He's practically begging his crew to let him go, furious over the disrespect. Jonathan yanks him back, but his own gaze, cold as ice, locks onto the prince. He asks if the prince wants to make this an official beef with the entire nation of Brucin. The prince just raises an eyebrow. "Am I supposed to say sorry?" Jonathan's lips curl into a smirk. "So the rumors are true. You really are rude AF, he says, "or you're deliberately trying to test our limits." Our hero doesn't even blink, firing back that the most lethal ally is one you can't trust, and then asks if they're ready to prove him wrong. Jonathan's response is instant and sharp. Knights have always let their swords do the talking, and right on cue, the Duke cuts in, announcing she would be thrilled to escort them all to the training arena. The scene snaps over to the training grounds, where the Duke is already teasing the prince, asking if provoking a fight was his master plan. Not that she's complaining, because she is absolutely living for this drama. Yuri just tells her to cut the crap, calling her out for being in on the whole scheme. In his head, he knows he needs to gauge the power level of the Brucin Knights, but that's not the whole story. He has a vision of the future, and one of these men is destined to rise up. and join the legendary Great 10. He's dead set on discovering which one it is before anyone else catches on. Down in the arena, the two fighters face off. Prion, oozing confidence, introduces himself and tells Roland they're about to have some fun. Roland, however, remains completely silent. From the stands, Yuri is laser-focused on the duel, absolutely certain that its conclusion will reveal something critical. The Great 10 are the continent's most OP warriors, holding so much power, they could literally start or end wars on a whim. That's why getting on the good side of a future member is a massive power-up. And let's be real, the strongest bonds are often forged in a good old-fashioned bro fight. Prion smirks, mentioning he's heard all about Roland, the so-called prodigy who's won a bunch of tournaments. As he blitzes forward, Prion taunts that a real battlefield is a world away from the polished performances they put on for nobles. Roland dodges with ease, thinking his opponent's moves are painfully predictable, so obvious he could end this in a second. He lunges for the win, but the entire stadium gasps when it's Prion who gets slammed to the ground. Roland had expertly dangled some fake bait, luring Prion into an attack that he shut down with a simple flick of his wrist. Then, with a perfect shift in his stance, the guy unleashed a lightning-fast counter. Watching from above, the prince admits the Brusson knight is legit. No average swordsman could handle him, but Roland is just built different. Prion concedes that he walked right into that trap and gives Roland his props, saying he learned a valuable lesson from their clash. The crowd roars with applause for them both, and the commander notes he'd expect nothing less from the legendary kingdom of knights. Our boy says he's flattered, adding that the knight from Brusson had some serious skills himself. The score is 1-0, and he knows this showdown is far from over. The commander immediately calls for his next champion, and tells him he's up. Our hero scans the new opponent, remarking that this guy looks like a real powerhouse. The commander confirms it, boasting that Jose is their strongest fighter, a man whose sole ambition is to be the undisputed best in all of Brusson. Yuri then turns to Jared and casually drops a bomb. He's taking this next round. Jared just stares, completely stunned, as our boy tells him to get a move on. The two new fighters introduce themselves, and after sizing up his foe, Jared gets a sinking feeling he's about to get wrecked, because Jose has the terrifying aura of someone who fights only for the kill. Jose calls him out, claiming he can read him like a book. Size up your opponent, then go for the first strike. Jared knows he can't block the incoming hit, so he scrambles to dodge. Jose just scoffs. You think you have time to be spacing out mid-fight? As a relentless storm of attacks rains down, Jared desperately throws up his guard, and the prince can only think one thing. Jose has the raw power of a freaking orc on steroids. The way Jose blends his raw strength with his swordsmanship is just on another level. The prince knows, without a doubt, that this man is destined to join the Great 10. But Jared is so tunnel-visioned on just blocking the onslaught that he never sees it coming when Jose literally hoists him into the air and slams him into the ground. And just like that, the fight was over. Afterwards, Jose asks for the warrior's name and even gives him props, admitting he's seriously skilled to have held out for so long. Humbled, Jared replies that he still has so much to learn from a master like him. The prince then gets to his feet, announcing that the score is now settled, and he's calling it quits for now. The Duke rolls her eyes. Are you two finally done with your little brawl? Yuri fires back, that building trust with his men is paramount. This fight wasn't just a fight, it was essential. The Duke makes it clear she's disappointed that the prince is pouring so much energy into his relationship with the Bruins, especially when he hasn't even made an effort to have a single real conversation with her. Just as the Duke starts laying on her manipulative charm, the commander swoops in and cuts her off. He asks when she plans on showing them to their office, reminding her of the promise she made. He presses, asking if they can see it right now. He adds that his men are getting pretty antsy about it. The Duke finally agrees, and then invites our boy to join them. But he shuts her down with ice in his veins, saying he has far more important matters to attend to. With that, he just dips out. The commander can't help but laugh while the Duke fumes, completely fed up with his attitude. A few days later, the Allied forces all converge at the Balshad Nations. The second they hear the Supreme Commander has shown up, they all start posturing and sizing each other up, everyone except the nation of Briol. Hernando approaches Yuri, worried, asking if they should ramp up their training since all the other commanders are already forming alliances. He points out they're already sharing strategies, but the prince just scoffs, certain they're only telling half the story. Every last person gathered here is a legendary swordmaster, and their egos would never let them reveal their full playbook. There's zero chance of real cooperation because every single one of them is looking down on the person standing next to them. The prince knows that if he wants to earn their respect, he's going to have to put on a show. He turns to Roland and asks if he's up for a few duels, and Roland's face immediately lights up, saying he's always ready. He says he feels honored that our hero even wants to fight him, but Yuri gives him a direct order, "Come at me for real." Hearing this, Roland grins and unleashes his mana. Seeing that pure energy, our boy knows Roland is the perfect sparring partner. The man explodes forward, launching an attack that our boy parries perfectly, right before Roland goes for a lightning-fast stab. And he has to admit, Roland's technique is surgically precise. There is not a single wasted motion. The warrior was always this efficient, but the last time they fought when he killed our boy, his sword was crackling with a completely different kind of emotion. Things have changed drastically since that time, and he can finally trust that Roland won't stab him in the back. But it's Yuri's responsibility to stand tall before him and command respect. The two clash in a brilliant display of sparks and steel, both unleashing their full power in an attempt to overpower the other. The growing crowd goes absolutely wild, and Jared just smirks, commenting that they seem pretty fired up today. That's when Jose shows up, marking on the prince's incredible talent before asking him for a small favor. He says he wants a duel, and Yuri is more than happy to oblige, even offering to let him borrow Jared for the match. At that, Jose practically drags Jared away with him, while Roland thanks Yuri for the incredible duel. They agree they have to fight again soon. After the sparring session, the prince chills out under a tree, but his real goal was to have a private chat with Asana. He asks her if she's dug up any intel on the foreigner, and she confirms she has a lead. He's right here in Balshad. This foreigner isn't just anybody. He's the undisputed greatest swordsman of the East, and a member of the legendary Great Ten. The story goes that he once faced Orkyu completely alone, though no one knows the real reason for their beef. Still, this guy could be a total game changer. Yuri orders Asana to track him down immediately, because his coming battle with Orkyu is guaranteed to be his last. And after that showdown, his time as one of the Great Ten will be over. The narrative then reminds us of the man who was once a prince of the Empire, but who now stands as the commander of the entire Allied forces. That man's name is Ragnar, a face our hero recognizes from his past life. The memory hits him like a truck, a flashback to the days before his regression, back when he was getting cozy with the princess. Yuri confidently tells her no one's going to be a problem, but Catherine's eyes show she's not buying it. Promising he'll handle everything, Yuri pulls her closer, and the two let their passion take over. Suddenly, a voice from the couch cuts in, telling them to take their games elsewhere, and the princess just about dies of embarrassment. Ragnar slowly rises. He scoffs, muttering that she's getting worked up over nothing. Then he turns to our hero and drops a bombshell question. Does he actually, truly like the princess? Our prince is completely lost, having no idea what he means. But Ragnar doesn't push it, just saying he'll figure it out on his own time. Snapping back to the present, Yuri realizes that even in that brief encounter, he knew Ragnar was on a whole other level. Fast forward to the War Council, where all the big shot leaders are busy gossiping about the new commander-in-chief. The nobles immediately start squabbling, seeing this as a chance to schmooze a royal and inject their own political drama into the mix. And just then, Yuri's eyes go wide. A shadow looms behind him. It's Ragnar, who appears out of nowhere to address the entire council. He strolls to the head of the table, announcing that things have been way too chill around here. He taps the armrest, and a suffocating aura floods the room. Then, with ice in his voice, he declares that he despises cowards. The air grows thick, and every single person in the room struggles under the immense pressure. But our prince? He just smirks. Now that's how you make an entrance. The commander warns that he'll cut down anyone who dares to run, then announces that under his command, every knight gets treated exactly the same. The room is dead silent, but Yuri breaks it, speaking up with, "I have a question." He asks the commander what intel they have on the orcs, all while thinking this guy has some serious guts. Ragnar cracks a smile and asks for his name. Our hero introduces himself, and the commander's smile widens. He says Georg has told him all about him. Getting to his feet, he calls it a damn good question, revealing that the Orkua have already united 3 massive tribes. He claps a heavy hand on the prince's shoulder, adding that their scouts have already pinpointed the first wave of troops massing near Balshad. He declares that their showdown with this force will be the very first battle for the new allied forces. The commander then looks Yuri dead in the eye, offering him the chance to lead the charge on the front lines. The entire room holds its breath. Without missing a beat, Yuri confidently accepts, vowing to pour his all into it. That night, however, he sits alone by a campfire, lost in the weight of his choice. Mary approaches him, asking what's eating at him. The prince questions why she's at his camp, and she gets straight to the point, mentioning how he snagged the lead spot. She points out that for someone who just got a huge opportunity, he looks more burdened than hyped. Her curiosity is piqued. He calls her out for being too nosy, a comment she completely ignores. Her expression turns dead serious. She reminds him that her own people's lives are on the line in this war, and she's not about to trust the front lines to some stranger she can't read. She tells him to drop the act. She wants straight answers. Mary then lays out a deal. If his answers satisfy her, she'll back him up in the coming fight. He's visibly confused. In response, the mage ignites a flame in her palm, a blazing reminder of why they call her the Arcana. She then throws a little shade, boasting she'll be way more useful than Hernando out on these grasslands. But Yuri's grim expression doesn't change. People are going to die in this battle, he says, his voice heavy. Standing up, he explains that the front lines are where the body count is always highest. He's going to have to bury comrades he just shared a meal with, friends he laughed with, and all of it will be a direct result of the choice he made today to take the lead. He admits he's trying not to get swept up in emotion, but he has to somehow bear the crushing weight of that responsibility. That raw honesty makes Mary's eyes light up. That, she says, is the perfect answer. She confesses she's not thrilled that he prioritizes his men over her. But regardless, she extends her hand, making a solemn vow to aid the prince. In his first battle, he will have her power. They shake on it, and our hero sincerely thanks her. Days later, the moment of truth arrives. The Allied forces' first battle is here. The two armies stare each other down across the battlefield, a sea of tension. At the very front, Yuri raises his sword and bellows the command to prepare for impact. Meanwhile, back with the command unit, Ragnar notices Mary is still standing right next to him, even as the frontline troops begin their advance. With that signature innocent smile, she informs him that she was personally stationed there by the third prince. At that very instant, our prince digs his heels into his horse and explodes forward, leading the charge straight into the fray like a man possessed. Watching him spearhead the attack into the enemy's weakest point, the Supreme Commander can't tell if he's witnessing breathtaking bravery or sheer insanity. Just then, Mary politely asks Ragnar to pardon her before raising her massive staff to the sky. A moment later, a colossal sphere of fire materializes above her, burning with the intensity of a second sun. With a flick of her wrist, the blazing meteor descends. It hurtles directly towards the orc army, set to detonate just seconds before Yuri's vanguard makes contact. Ragnar goes pale, screaming that she's casting way too close to their own soldiers. But Mary just flashes him a smirk, dripping with confidence, and says, "This was the signal." As a blazing meteor screams down from the sky, our hero plunges headfirst into the orc horde. He skewers the first monster with a flawless spear thrust, then vaults backward, clearing the blast zone a split second before the spell detonates. With the explosion still roaring, he whips his sword forward, summoning a colossal wall of water to shield his soldiers and roaring for them to charge. The Supreme Commander is frozen on the spot, completely dumbfounded as the prince dives straight through the heart of the raging inferno. Our guy leads the vanguard once more, commanding his men to follow him directly into the wall of flames. A pack of boneheaded orcs decides to rush forward, completely ignoring the fiery spectacle. The prince answers their war cry by launching his sword, burying it deep in a monster's throat. As he does, another beast tries to shank him from behind, but a comrade in arms leaps in, parrying the attack like an absolute legend. Witnessing this insane display of guts and grit, the other commanders finally get the memo. It's time to prove that Brielle isn't the only kingdom, bringing A-listers to this fight. As the chaos of battle swells, the leader of the Holy Kingdom orders her soldiers to back the Brielle warriors up and utterly demolish any lone enemy foolish enough to get separated. The Supreme Commander cracks a grin, totally floored by how the prince's insane fire charge stunt sent his army's morale rocketing into the stratosphere. But what's even more mind-blowing is the sheer genius of the strategy. He unleashed an inferno on the enemy, while his own squad remained completely shielded behind water walls. It gets him thinking, how on earth did he get Mary to sign off on such a bat-crap crazy idea? The Duke admits she was totally against it at first, but the prince somehow won her over. He delivered on his promise, and Ragnar has to agree. It was a hell of a premiere for the Allied forces. Debut battle. That evening, the Duke is at her desk, buried under a mountain of paperwork. She mutters that it's awesome. Prince Yuri secured their first victory, but an unannounced visitor completely kills her vibe, and she snaps that a little celebration doesn't give someone the right to just storm into her room uninvited. The culprit is none other than Sensei Hernando, who coolly notes she could at least try to be welcoming, considering he was her mentor once upon a time. Hernando teases that she could ask how he's been, or maybe just offer a proper greeting, but Mary is having none of it. She fires back that he can hardly call himself a teacher after he completely ghosted her out of nowhere. Hernando settles into a chair like he owns the place, saying he just dropped in to check on his old student. More precisely, he wants to see how her research on the transcending interpretation formula is progressing. Hearing this, the Duke concedes. She's actually made some major breakthroughs. She explains that this unique magic lets someone decipher unknown languages by linking them to ones they already know. She even found out it's directly connected to ancient magic. Visibly impressed, he tells her to keep him in the loop with any new developments. Then his entire demeanor shifts. He gets dead serious, asking if Yuri has sparked her interest. Explaining that he desperately needs her help, Mary lets out a sly smile, pointing out how strangely invested he seems to be in the prince's future. She reminds Hernando that the Grand Wizard has no business meddling in the fates of mortals. Hernando concedes the point, but he insists that the situation is way more complicated than she could ever imagine. Way too many powerful people are now caught up in the prince's destiny, including the commander of the empire. The scene cuts to a command tent, where Supreme Commander Ragnar is giving our prince his next mission, a high-stakes scouting operation that could be a total game-changer for the war. He lays out the plan. They need to infiltrate Orc territory, deep in the eastern region. The following morning, he clarifies that the army will be pushing through a seriously treacherous area, a zone crawling with potential ambushes. That's why they need a separate scouting party to make sure they don't get encircled and broken. Hearing the plan, the prince seems a little unsettled. He suggests the Supreme Commander should offer another nation a fair shot, pointing out that Brielle already took center stage once. But Ragnar is unmovable, insisting he will only entrust this mission to someone he has complete faith in, and right now, he thinks Brielle is the top contender. With no other way out, our hero cracks a cheeky smile and hits Ragnar with a counter-proposal of his own. A while later, a runner informs the Holy Kingdom's commander that new orders have come down from the top, concerning a unit to protect the main force. To decide who gets the job, they're going to hold a competition between any of the nations that want to throw their hat in the ring. Meanwhile, the other commanders are getting seriously hyped, intrigued by Ragnar's bizarre method for selecting his elite units. Back in Yuri's camp, Hernando reads the new directive aloud. Soldiers are to cut off the right ears of any orcs they kill, and consideration for future missions will be based on which nation collects the most ears. The Great Wizard looks absolutely appalled that our prince actually proposed something so barbaric. Our boy just grins, saying these are direct orders from the Supreme Commander. Everyone has to join in, and this little game will reveal each nation's true power. However, his most trusted advisor, he realizes the skills this mission demands are completely different from anything he's ever trained for. Their soldiers are about to have a rough time, but Yuri just flashes that wicked little smirk that screams he's already 5 moves ahead. At the break of dawn, the main event kicks off, and the Supreme Commander himself strides out to declare the rules once more. Their mission is to hunt down orcs and drop them on sight, just as they were briefed. Whichever nation racks up the highest ear count gets top priority for every mission moving forward. You can tell the 3 commanders are absolutely amped, just itching to flex their power. Flipping the hourglass in his hand, Ragnar officially gets the game started. A smirk plays on his lips, totally invested in seeing how this little scheme is going to unfold. One of his own men remarks that he's been listening a bit too much to the young prince. Ragnar just laughs, admitting the kid is seriously starting to grow on him, since his crazy brilliant ideas somehow always deliver victory on the battlefield. Yuri's soldiers crowd around, asking if he's got a strategy. He tells them their first move is to hunt down a pack of orcs. He lets out a laugh, promising them he has it all under control. And wouldn't you know it, they practically stumble upon a roaming group of orc riders. Our boy reveals his red crystal necklace, and its enchanting magical glow immediately draws the eyes of the clueless orcs. With the crystal still pulsing in his hand, he reminds his soldiers that they just need the ears. There's no need to overexert themselves. After that, he bolts forward and begins carving through orcs left and right like a man possessed. Witnessing this display, the absolute unit of an orc leader steps up, staring him down with raw, murderous intent. But before the creature even finishes its wind-up, the Prince of Brielle takes its head clean off. Bro came locked and loaded for anything this contest could throw his way. His first trump card is the fiery, magic necklace he yoinked from some bandits, and his second is the set of custom-made daggers strapped to his waist. Just then, one of his soldiers excitedly reports they've already bagged 10 full ears, but our boy just grins, a knife held casually in his hand, and says that's barely a drop in the bucket. The soldier is visibly confused and asks him what he's talking about. Yuri gets that signature look of confidence in his eyes as he plunges the dagger straight into the ground. The blade erupts, shooting a blinding pillar of light toward the sky, glowing with a powerful aura of electric blue and brilliant gold. The prince then turns to his squad and announces that they are not just here to collect a few souvenirs. They came here to farm aura, and that means they aren't heading home until every single orc in this entire territory is completely annihilated.